At just 8 years old, he unknowingly triggered a power that didn't belong in the hands of someone ordinary. But the moment his mother witnessed it, panic took over her expression. Without hesitation, she suppressed it and forced him to swear that such an ability would never be shown to anyone again. In this world, those born with special powers were called wizards, beings who existed far above normal humans. Yet even among them, status was everything. Society was split into two groups: the nobles, direct descendants of divine lineage, and the knights, those born from a mix of noble and common blood. Knights were treated as inferior, discarded by the noble class without hesitation. His mother understood this cruel reality better than anyone, because his father belonged to that very group. That knowledge was the reason she tried to bury his power before it could ever attract attention, hoping to protect him from a fate she had already seen coming. But destiny was already moving in a direction she could not control. When the truth of his existence finally began to surface, everything he believed about himself started to collapse. He was never just a knight's son living an ordinary life. Deep within his bloodline lay something far more significant, a connection to the Zohar family, one of the most dominant and feared lineages in existence. That revelation changed everything in an instant. What once looked like a life of limitation was now something entirely different. He was not meant to remain beneath a system built on discrimination and hierarchy. Instead, he carried the potential to rise above it, and possibly reshape the world that had tried to keep him down. In a quiet village, a boy draped in a cape grips a stick and solemnly declares himself a wizard. A girl eagerly joins, taking on the role of a monster that devours wizards. The game escalates instantly. The boy focuses as if channeling real power, then swings the stick with full force and strikes her. The girl reacts in anger, insisting he actually hurt her, while he stubbornly maintains that monsters are meant to lose. The argument spirals until she demands equal status as a wizard, which he refuses. From a distance, an old man named Rabbis watches with quiet amusement before approaching with two villagers. He remarks on the children's energy, but the mood shifts when the boy, Turan, asks what it takes to become a wizard. Rabbis explains that wizards stand at the top of society, inheriting power from ancient bloodlines, and bluntly concludes that neither child could ever become one. The harshness draws criticism, but Rabbis turn serious, revealing a disturbing rumor: a monstrous creature has appeared. The atmosphere tightens. He recounts a report of a massive, shadow-wrapped beast resembling a leopard. Fear spreads, though some reassurance comes from the belief that the village chief has gone to summon a wizard. Parents warn their children to avoid the forest. Rabbis emphasizes the danger, reminding everyone that without a wizard, defeating such a creature is nearly impossible. Far from the village, on a hill covered in grazing sheep, an older Turan lies in the grass, half asleep. Life has become an unchanging loop of silence and routine. He feels the weight of isolation, as though even speech might fade from lack of use. His thoughts are interrupted when Rabbis arrives, scolding him for his laziness. Turan barely reacts, dismissing him with indifference. Their exchange reveals lingering tension tied to the past, especially after the death of Turan's mother and a dispute over her livestock. Turan makes it clear that he has no intention of sharing what remains of her legacy. Rabbis shifts the topic to the monster, describing its size and danger. Turan listens with mild interest, showing no fear. When warned that he could be at risk, he remains unmoved, even pointing out that Rabbis likely cares more about the sheep than about him. The old man leaves in frustration, while Turan returns to his thoughts. The idea of monsters and wizards lingers, stirring faint curiosity. As evening approaches, Turan senses something unusual, a metallic scent carried on the air. Recognizing it as blood, he follows the trail into the forest. The deeper he goes, the stronger it becomes until he reaches its source. There, he finds Rabbis' mutilated body. The scene is brutal, far beyond what any normal animal could cause. Turan calmly concludes that the monster is responsible. A sudden impact shakes the ground behind him. A massive claw crashes down, and from the shadows emerges a towering creature of rock and dark energy. Turan turns to face it without fear, studying it with cold focus. Memories surface of childhood questions about monsters and the belief that only wizards could defeat them. Those reassurances echo faintly as he confronts the reality before him. He attempts to command the creature with a single word, testing whether such authority holds power. Nothing happens. Another command follows, equally useless. The monster advances, its presence overwhelming, yet Turan remains composed. His calm suggests he expected this failure. As the creature lunges, he narrowly evades its strike, shifting from passive testing to action. Reaching into his pocket, he retrieves a simple stone and a sling. With deliberate intent, he begins issuing precise commands, not to the monster, but to the weapon. The stone compresses unnaturally, gaining density. Its motion accelerates as he spins the sling, the air distorting with force. When released, the projectile tears forward with immense speed, striking the monster and blasting through its body in a violent surge of energy. The attack leaves a gaping hole, but Turan does not stop. He loads a second, larger stone and repeats the process. The next strike lands directly on the creature's head, destroying it completely. The massive body collapses, lifeless. Turan watches the remains without satisfaction, only quiet assessment. It is his first time using this power against a monster, and he treats it as observation rather than victory. Considering what to do with the corpse, he grows mildly irritated at the inconvenience. Wiping blood from his face, he mutters about the burden left behind by others. As he turns away, his true nature becomes clear. The quiet shepherd living in isolation is not ordinary at all. Beneath the calm exterior lies a mage. 8 years earlier, Turan remembered the exact moment everything changed. At 10, he discovered his power, casually lifting objects around him with a bluish energy inside his home. Excited, he tried to show his mother, even mentioning he could create fire and wind. But instead of pride, she froze in fear. That memory stayed vivid. She suddenly shouted at him to stop, the only time she had ever raised her voice like that. Confused, he watched as she calmed herself and asked him to sit. She gently asked if he wanted to live with her for a long time. He agreed immediately. Then she made him promise to never use that power again, especially in front of others. When he asked why, she reminded him of a story about nobles and knights. Though both were mages, they were not equal. Nobles descended from divine beings, while knights carried diluted blood through humans. His power, she revealed, came from his father, a knight from outside the village. Some nobles treated knights like tools or slaves. Because of that, one rule mattered above all. No one could know he was a mage. She asked for his promise again. Filled with fear, he gave it. 8 years later, Turan stood by his window, still keeping that promise. He had no intention of revealing himself or leaving the mountain. His quiet life was enough. Suddenly, loud banging shattered the silence. Villagers called his name, demanding he come out. Irritated, he opened the door to find a group waiting, led by a large man glaring at him. Calmly, Turan summed up their accusation. They believed he had killed rabbis. The leader grabbed him, accusing him of injuring the old man and leaving him to monsters. Turan didn't defend himself. Instead, he exposed their fear, pointing out that they were too afraid to act and now blamed him to escape guilt. That struck a nerve. The man attacked, but Turan dodged easily and threw him down. As others rushed in, Turan moved effortlessly. His magic stayed subtle, a small push of wind, a slight shift in balance, a precise touch. One by one, the villagers fell, disarmed and overwhelmed without him ever revealing anything obvious. He used only what was necessary, avoiding lethal force. Within moments, they were all down. This quiet control was how he had hidden his secret for 8 years. Standing over them, he brushed off his hands and coldly remarked they should have spent this effort on Rabbi's funeral. When a group of women approached, he dismissed them and told them to carry the others away before heading back inside. He already knew the consequences, trouble with the village. Unfair trade, but it didn't matter. If needed, he would handle it the same way. Then came another knock. This time it was calm and measured. He opened the door, expecting more trouble, but stopped. A scarred, gray-haired traveler stood there, politely apologizing and asking for a favor. The contrast caught Turan off guard. Regaining composure, he responded politely. Though it felt unfamiliar, his mother had taught him manners, but he rarely used them here. Suspicious of the armed stranger, he almost sent him to the village, but the man's hunger was obvious. With a sigh, Turan invited him in. They shared a simple meal, which the traveler treated like a feast. Conversation followed. The man noted how unusual it was for Turan to have never left the area. Turan confirmed he had always lived there as a shepherd. The traveler observed his refined manners. and Turan credited his late mother. The man respected that. When asked about his purpose, the traveler revealed he was there to deal with a nearby monster. Testing him, Turan admitted he was a mage, assuming this was the one sent by the village. The traveler confirmed it, then the tone shifted. The man pointed out something strange. He could sense a monster but not see it, and Turan showed no fear despite knowing the danger. That didn't match a normal villager. The tension grew as he questioned Turan's identity. At that moment, Turan recalled his mother's words again, how knights were treated like disposable tools beneath nobles. Never truly free, she had wanted to protect him from that fate, asking him to stay hidden and remain with her. He had agreed, back in the present. His expression turned cold. The traveler slightly drew his sword and warned that protecting such a secret might require extreme actions. He introduced himself as Cahorn, making it clear that sometimes survival meant being willing to kill. Hearing the warning, Turan looked away, his expression dark, as if the idea struck something deep within him. The tension lingered as Cahorn awkwardly wondered if his earlier remark had gone too far. Turan stayed quiet for a moment before admitting he did not understand humor. Cahorn quickly took the blame, brushing it off as a poorly judged joke. Turan forced a faint smile, explaining it was his first time hearing a mage joke, which only made Cahorn tease him lightly before apologizing again. Realizing they had never properly introduced themselves, Cahorn offered his hand. He introduced himself as a traveler, and Turan followed, presenting himself as an 18-year-old shepherd. When Cahorn casually revealed he was 75, Turan was visibly surprised. The explanation was simple: mages lived longer and aged slowly. Curiosity shifted the conversation. Cahorn shared that he had spent decades serving a noble house before choosing to wander freely. In return, Turan maintained his act, offering a fabricated past. Despite the falsehood, their exchange felt natural, something Turan had never experienced before. Without noticing, evening arrived. Cahorn prepared to leave, placing high-quality silver coins on the table as payment. Before stepping out, he hinted he might return during his stay, leaving the door open for another meeting. Days later, Turan returned to his routine, guiding his sheep across the hillside. At a simple command, they gathered instantly. His mood remained lighter than usual, still influenced by their conversation. It had been his first time speaking so freely with someone, and Cahorn's easy humor and knowledge stood far above anyone in the village. Over those days, Turan had come to one conclusion: Cahorn was a good man. It quietly challenged his belief that knights were nothing more than tools of nobles. Still, he never found a way to tell him the truth. There was no longer any monster on the mountain. Meanwhile, Cahorn searched the forest. Troubled by what he found, signs of battle were clear, yet no trace of a magical aura remained. It seemed the monster had already been killed, though he could not understand by whom. Perhaps someone else had taken the task. In the end, he accepted it. If the danger was gone, that was enough. But suddenly, his instincts flared. A grotesque creature lunged from behind. A monstrous wraith formed from a corrupted corpse. Shock struck immediately. Such a thing should not exist if proper methods had been followed. Before he could think further, it attacked. He narrowly avoided the first strike and quickly realized the problem. Whoever killed the original beast had failed to disperse its mana. Whether through ignorance or intent, it had turned into something far worse. There was no time to dwell on it. He launched an attack, forming a golden arrow of magic, but it shattered on contact. The creature's power far exceeded his own. It vanished, then struck again from his shadow, wounding him despite his attempt to evade. The truth became clear. This was beyond a knight's level. Only a noble could stand against such a monster. Even so, he refused to retreat. Gathering all his remaining power, he prepared a final strike, ready to risk everything the moment the creature lunged again. At that exact instant, a blue light cut through the forest. The attack pierced straight through the monster's head. Dropping it instantly, Cahorn froze in disbelief. Then a familiar presence appeared beside him, Turan. Calm as ever, the realization hit slowly. The quiet shepherd standing before him was a mage. When questioned, Turan offered no explanation for hiding it. Asked why he intervened instead of walking away, his answer traced back to their earlier discussion. Cahorn had once said the villagers were pitiful, living without protection. Those born with power carried something greater and should protect others. Though not all believed that, Turan held onto that idea in his own way. Everyone chose their own path. But the moment did not last. The fallen wraith suddenly rose again and attacked. Both avoided the strike, and Cahorn immediately understood the danger. This was not something they could defeat head-on. He urged evacuation, choosing to stay behind and hold the creature off despite knowing the odds. Turan responded simply, then he released his power. Watching him, Cahorn realized something shocking. The earlier strike had not even been close to his full strength. The young man hidden in the mountains possessed power capable of destroying a monster even nobles would approach with caution. In that moment, Cahorn understood he was witnessing something far beyond a simple encounter, something that could one day shake the very foundation of the world of mages. The stones around them slowly lifted into the air under Turan's control. At that moment, he focused on one thing, understanding his own limits. Cahorn, standing beside him, refused to hold back, insisting they fight together. But almost immediately, he realized the truth. He could not keep up. His presence would only interfere. Accepting this, he stepped back, choosing instead to let Turan's ability fully unfold. As Turan continued evading the Wraith's attacks, Cahorn called out a crucial fact. Such a creature could not be defeated through physical means. When asked what would work, he answered with fire or lightning. Turan reacted instantly, engulfing the Wraith in flames. But the attack had no effect. That failure made something clear to Cahorn. Turan lacked even basic magical knowledge. A disturbing thought followed. If Turan had killed the original beast, then he had never absorbed its magic power before. Without delay, Cahorn corrected him. The flames needed to be compressed and released with force, not spread across the surface. Turan followed the instruction, forming a small fireball, compressing it further before launching it. This time, the result was immediate. The Wraith was engulfed, its body consumed by roaring fire. Cahorn urged him not to stop, to continue pouring in power until nothing remained. Turan maintained the flames until the creature was completely destroyed. Watching this, Cahorn finally relaxed. A monster that demanded noble-level strength had been eliminated by someone living as a simple shepherd. Then came the next step, absorbing the remaining magic power. When Turan asked how, Cahorn guided him to imagine drawing energy into his body. Turan followed the instruction. Green strands of light rose from the remains and flowed into him. The moment it was complete, he felt a powerful surge throughout his body. Cahorn, witnessing this, was stunned. This had been Turan's first time absorbing magic. Normally, such power grew slowly, but absorbing energy from monsters accelerated it greatly. The realization was shocking. Without ever doing this before, Turan had already reached such a level. With newfound respect, Cahorn asked about his origins. Turan did not answer directly, instead pointing out his injury. Only then did Cahorn notice the severity of his wound. Back at the cabin, Turan treated him calmly. Cahorn found it strange that someone so powerful would act with such simplicity. Turan dismissed the idea, insisting he was only a shepherd who did not even know his father. He explained that this life had been his mother's final wish. Cahorn listened carefully, then surprised him by agreeing with her decision. Power always attracted conflict. He spoke from experience, recalling a devastating war between noble families. The house he once served had suffered immense losses, including nearly everyone he cared about. Friends, mentors, and even his own family had all been taken from him. From that perspective, Turan's mother had been right. Such a life was dangerous and often meaningless. Yet she had also underestimated one thing, Turan's talent. Even by noble standards, his ability was exceptional. That thought unsettled Turan. It raised questions about his own origins. Cahorn then suggested something unexpected, that Turan should leave the mountain and see the world. Humanity still faced threats, and while nobles fought among themselves, people with both strength and compassion were needed. More than that, he believed Turan himself was no longer satisfied with his current life. When asked what he could gain, Cahorn explained that it depended on his desires, power, recognition, companionship, or purpose. He described paths beyond the mountain, traveling, hunting monsters, becoming an adventurer, or even joining a noble house. Compared to tending sheep, those possibilities carried a different kind of meaning. For the first time, Turan felt genuine curiosity about the outside world. Cahorn promised to support whatever path he chose, then asked about his bloodline ability. Seeing Turan's confusion, he explained, nobles inherited unique traits from their lineage, and these abilities often set them apart. To help him understand, he demonstrated with magic and asked if anything came naturally to Turan. After thinking it through, Turan mentioned two things, his unusually sharp sense of smell and his accuracy when throwing objects. Cahorn analyzed this carefully. Heightened senses could indicate a bloodline trait, while precision with projectiles was a known but common skill. As Turan explained further, Cahorn's expression gradually darkened. In the end, he reached a conclusion. Turan's traits closely resembled those of a powerful lineage known for tracking and hunting, the Zahar family. It was the same family responsible for destroying Cahorn's own in the past. Those words struck Turan like a sudden chill, leaving him rooted in place. He had never once suspected that his own family belonged to Zahar, the same lineage responsible for wiping out everything Cain once held dear. The weight of that revelation pressed down on him, and for a brief moment, he found himself at a loss. An apology felt misplaced, considering those acts had been carried out by relatives he had never even known. To him, their crimes felt distant, almost as if committed by strangers. Sensing his turmoil, Cain broke the silence and eased the tension. He made it clear that Turan bore no responsibility for a war he had never taken part in. Though Turan understood the sentiment, he still struggled to respond. Cain, wearing his usual restrained expression, reflected on the burdens carried by adults. If hatred were always repaid with more hatred, conflict would stretch on without end. The conversation shifted when Turan brought up Cain's decision to descend the mountain. He wondered whether Cain felt any regret. In response, Cain placed a hand on his shoulder and spoke about the path Turan might take. With his natural talent, entering the Zahar family would almost be inevitable if he pursued power. Yet Cain believed in his character. Turan had saved his life and revealed a secret he had hidden for years. Because of that, Cain held on to the hope that Turan might one day stand within Zahar and prevent another devastating war. Still, he reminded him there was no need to rush such a decision. After a pause, Turan admitted that he had begun to make up his mind. He intended to leave the mountain eventually, though not immediately. He would wait until Cain had recovered more fully from his injuries. Cain brushed it off as a minor wound, but accepted the gesture nonetheless. From that day forward, Cain began teaching Turan the fundamentals of magic. He explained that magic required power as its foundation, but that power came in different forms, each suited to specific types of spells. When Turan asked how one determined the right match, Cain broke it down into three key factors: bloodline, affinity, and causality. Bloodline referred to the innate traits one was born with, something especially evident among noble families. Certain abilities came naturally depending on heritage. Affinity, on the other hand, was more like proficiency, the ease with which someone could wield a particular type of magic. The final factor, causality, was the most complex. Even Cain admitted he did not fully grasp it. To illustrate, Cain described a scenario where someone attempted to use magic power directly to kill him without any proper cause. The result would be nothing at all. Placing his hand on a nearby object, he explained that when a desired outcome lacked a sufficient cause, or when the goal exceeded what was realistically achievable, magic would simply fail. This explanation clarified many things for Turan. He quickly reasoned that, instead of vaguely wishing for an outcome, one needed to create a logical cause to achieve it. For instance, rather than attempting to will someone's death outright, it would be far more effective to use a concrete method, such as fire, to bring about that result. Cain was impressed by how quickly he grasped the concept, noting that such insight suited a scholarly mind. Their discussions continued, branching into more complex questions. Turan began to realize that mastering magic required far more than raw power. It demanded understanding, judgment, and careful application. At one point, he grew curious about the abilities tied to the Zahar bloodline. Cain explained that their strength lay in stealth and tracking, then encouraged him to try it. Following the guidance, Turan focused inward, imagining himself fading from perception, silent, unseen, and undetectable. In the next instant, his form began to blur until it vanished entirely from sight. Cain confirmed the success, noting that he could no longer see him. When Turan reappeared, Cain quietly remarked on how fearsome that ability had been during the war, though he cautioned that it was far from invincible. Despite everything, Turan could not help but question why Cain was willing to teach someone from an enemy family. Cain answered simply, gratitude for having his life saved, and trust in Turan's character. Not long after, news of Turan's decision to leave the village spread. The village chief was taken aback, questioning why such a major choice had been made without consultation. Turan responded bluntly. His flock was his own property, and he would either sell it at a fair price or release the sheep entirely. Knowing his stubborn nature, the chief relented and paid him. With everything settled, Turan prepared to depart alongside Cain. Along the way, he mentioned the unpaid debt the villagers owed Cain and offered to retrieve it. Cain dismissed the idea, explaining that he had never intended to collect payment, especially since it was Turan who had truly dealt with the magical beast. Eventually, the time came for them to part ways. Cain chose to continue alone. As he always had, Turan accepted this, expressing gratitude for everything he had learned. They exchanged their farewells, each wishing the other well. Turan remained still, watching Cain's figure grow smaller in the distance until it disappeared completely. Only later did he come to understand the depth of his respect for the old knight. Though he had always received love from his mother, there had been a quiet longing within him for a fatherly presence, something Cain had unknowingly fulfilled. Days after their separation, Turan traveled alone into a barren wasteland. The air was thick with drifting sand, gradually obscuring his vision. Amid the emptiness, he spotted a group of traveling peddlers and approached them for directions. They pointed him toward a nearby city called Murray. After thanking them and turning to leave, he was abruptly stopped. The group demanded something in return for the information. In an instant, several of them drew their weapons, forcing him to drop his belongings. Their intentions were clear. This was a robbery, and in such a desolate place, no one would intervene. Turan's expression hardened as he recalled the principles Cain had taught him. Instead of fear, a faint smile appeared on his face. The situation, dangerous as it was, had just become an opportunity to put his knowledge to the test. The bandits mocks Turan, but he shows no reaction. Instead, he quietly evaluates the situation, his mind working through every detail. One of the men mocks him, suggesting he must have lost his senses to speak as if he were a mage. Turan offers no reply. He simply begins to gather his mana. A faint green energy forms around his hand, swirling with controlled precision. With a subtle motion, he releases it, shaping the surrounding air into a violent gust of wind. Sand is swept upward, and the bandits are thrown off balance, struggling to keep their footing. As they stagger, Turan reflects on what he has just done. Manipulating what already exists proves far more efficient than creating something from nothing, conserving a significant amount of mana. The bandits collapse across the ground, stunned by the sudden force. Before they can recover, Turan continues. He retrieves a small vial of water and draws its contents into the air. In an instant, the liquid freezes, forming a sharp icicle. Soon, multiple shards hover around him, suspended and ready. With a simple motion of his hand, he sends them forward. The projectiles strike with lethal speed, cutting through one of the bandits. Observing the result, Turan notes that such a technique would be even more effective near a larger water source. Launching them like solid projectiles increases both speed and impact. The overwhelming display shatters the bandits' confidence. Their leader drops to his knees, pleading for mercy, finally realizing the magnitude of the threat before him. The others follow, offering everything they have in exchange for their lives. Turan steps forward, his expression cold and unmoved. He ignores their pleas entirely. When some attempt to strike from behind, the ground beneath them erupts. Massive pillars of rock surge upward, impaling them instantly. In moments, only the leader remains, frozen in horror as he takes in the scene. Standing amid the aftermath, Turan approaches the final survivor. He seeks an answer rather than vengeance. The man, trembling, agrees to speak. Turan asks why they would attack without caution, knowing that a lone traveler could be dangerous. The answer surprises him. They had mistaken his politeness for weakness. His respectful demeanor had convinced them he was nothing more than an easy target. Turan processes this calmly and acknowledges that he has learned something valuable. The bandit, clinging to hope, wonders if this means he will be spared. The answer comes not through words, but through action. A single droplet of water forms above the man, marking the end that follows. As silence returns, Turan recalls the warnings of his teacher. He had been told that the world was filled with people who would harm others without hesitation, and that showing mercy to such individuals could lead to greater tragedy. Standing among the fallen, Turan begins to understand the weight of those words. Sparing one life out of misplaced compassion might one day cost many more. With that realization, he accepts what he has done. There is no turning back, deciding he has already lost enough time. He follows the tracks left behind in the sand. As he walks alone through the wasteland, a thought surfaces: he has taken lives. The reality settles heavily on him, stirring a brief sense of guilt. Yet he suppresses it, holding on to the reasoning he has just embraced. Those who prey on others would only continue their violence. Gradually, his resolve steadies. Leaving the desert behind, Turan eventually reaches a completely different landscape. Lush, vibrant and full of life. For the first time, he sees a city. The sight fills him with quiet amazement. Towering stone buildings rise before him, far removed from the simplicity of his village. The scale, the movement, and the sheer number of people overwhelm him. As he moves through the marketplace, everything feels unfamiliar. He approaches a fruit vendor, intending to ask for directions. The man initially assumes he is a customer and greets him warmly, but the mood shifts when Turan reveals he only wants information. The vendor's attitude turns cold, dismissing him outright, confused by the sudden change. Turan wonders if there are unspoken rules in such places. To avoid conflict, he adapts. He asks for the price of fruit and learns about the local currency. After making a purchase, the vendor's demeanor improves immediately, and he provides the directions without hesitation. Following those instructions, Turan arrives at a large inn. Inside, he is greeted warmly by an employee named Lena, who treats him as an important guest. Without hesitation, he pays for a room. However, when he asks about nearby monster bounties, her response changes. She reminds him that information is not freely given and directs him toward a board displaying such opportunities. As they speak, Turan reveals his unfamiliarity with the outside world, prompting Lena to explain concepts like the town hall, where official matters are handled. She also mentions that he will need to wait until the next day for further information. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of a man named Madden, who confidently claims that killing monsters can turn an ordinary person into a mage. Lena initially dismisses the idea, but Madden insists he has witnessed it himself. His group shares the same belief, pursuing strength through hunting. Turan listens carefully and asks whether any of them have succeeded. The answer is no. In the entire city, only a handful of true mages exist. Madden studies Turan's simple equipment and questions his readiness, but becomes intrigued when he sees the sling he carries. Recognizing its practicality, he suggests that Turan could be useful as a ranged attacker and offers him a place in their group. Turan considers it briefly, but declines. His path is different. Later, alone in his room, he reflects on everything that has happened. The transition from his old life feels almost unreal. Looking at his belongings, he struggles to fully grasp that he has truly left everything behind. Mana flows visibly around his hand, a constant reminder of the road he has chosen. Then a soft knock breaks the silence. He immediately becomes alert. There is no response when he calls out, and a warning from his teacher resurfaces in his mind. Safety is never guaranteed. Even in a city, remaining cautious. He prepares himself. As the door slowly opens, Mana gathers in his hand, ready to strike. Peering through the narrow gap, he is caught off guard. The visitor is Lena. She steps inside casually, her demeanor playful as she remarks about the cold and her intention to keep him company. Turan can only stare, completely bewildered, unable to grasp what she truly means. Lena stood before Turan, repeating his earlier words as if she could not quite believe them. When he calmly confirmed his lack of interest, she shifted tactics and made her intentions unmistakably clear, offering herself in exchange for a small payment. Turan interrupted her without hesitation, questioning what would happen if there was nothing he desired at all. Unfazed, she stepped closer and placed a hand against his chest, insisting that he should not deny what she believed was obvious. In response, Turan's expression emptied completely. Any trace of emotion vanished, leaving behind a stillness so absolute that it resembled a statue, detached, unmoved, and impossible to read. The reaction caught her off guard, leaving her unable to comprehend such complete indifference. At that moment, a memory surfaced in Turan's mind. He recalled his teacher's stern warning about the dangers hidden behind temptation. Even those who seemed harmless could carry unseen risks, and giving in to impulse could lead to consequences that lingered far beyond the moment. It had been a lesson about restraint as much as caution. Back in the present, Lena withdrew, clearly frustrated, and left him alone. Lying on the bed, Turan reflected on how different life in the city felt compared to everything he had known. It seemed harsh and transactional, where even the simplest interactions came with a cost. Elsewhere in the inn, one of the hunters questioned Madden's earlier attempt to recruit Turan. Doubting his usefulness, at first, Madden dismissed the boy as someone who could have served as bait due to his attitude. But then his tone softened. He admitted that Turan reminded him of his younger self, and that he had been concerned about someone so inexperienced traveling alone. Despite his rough demeanor, Madden had simply wanted to give him a better chance of surviving. Unbeknownst to them, Turan overheard everything. A faint smile appeared on his face as his impression of the city shifted slightly. Perhaps it was not as cold as he had initially believed. The next day, he made his way to a large building at the center of the city. Inside, a clerk greeted him with a formal air. Turan stated his purpose plainly. He had come to hunt monsters. The reaction was one of surprise. His teacher's words echoed again in his mind, reminding him that respect in this world often depended on strength. Without explaining himself further, Turan presented proof of his identity. Testing that lesson in practice, the clerk handed him a bounty sheet with little interest, instructing him to review it and return later. Examining the drawing, Turan questioned whether the target was truly a monster or just an ordinary crow. The clerk responded with sarcasm before giving an important warning. Any monster killed had to be brought back intact. If its mana was not properly dispersed, the corpse could transform into something far more dangerous. The law treated negligence in such matters with extreme severity. Turan acknowledged this calmly. He was already familiar with the consequences and had no intention of repeating past mistakes. After a brief exchange about the role of knights, who prioritized maintaining order over hunting, he left without another word. Ignoring the clerk's dismissive attitude, the scene shifted to the forest. Hidden in the shadows, a monstrous crow watched silently. Moments later, the hunt ended abruptly. The creature fell, its body torn through with a single decisive strike. Back at the bounty office, the atmosphere changed completely when Turan returned far sooner than expected. Carrying the corpse, the clerk, now visibly shaken, confirmed that he had completed the task alone. Turan answered simply and asked for his reward. The man's earlier arrogance vanished, replaced by nervous politeness as he handed over the payment. Even after receiving it, Turan lingered, asking if there were more monsters worth hunting. The question left the staff speechless. Over the next few days, he continued hunting relentlessly. By the time he returned to the inn again, he had taken down dozens of monsters. A table was set before him, filled with rich food, and Lena watched in astonishment as he ate. She remarked on his success, but Turan corrected her silently in his thoughts. Money was not his goal. What mattered was the mana he gained from each hunt. He could feel his strength growing, yet he also sensed a limit. Relying on weaker creatures would no longer be enough. The path ahead would require something more. The calm atmosphere was suddenly broken when several hunters approached his table with ill intent. They mocked him and hinted at taking a share of his earnings. Before they could act, Turan struck one of them with sudden speed, sending him reeling. When another attacked, Turan stopped the blow effortlessly. A third attempted to strike him from behind, only to be subdued just as easily. The difference in strength was undeniable. The confrontation ended quickly, and the tension in the room snapped. Lena intervened, demanding that the fight stop. At that moment, Madden arrived and immediately apologized for his men's behavior. Bowing deeply, later he came again to offer a more formal apology, explaining that his group had been struggling financially. Though embarrassed, his companions were forced to admit their wrongdoing. When Turan asked about their situation, Madden admitted that while not desperate, they were close to being unable to afford even basic expenses. Without hesitation, Turan offered him a pouch of coins. The gesture left Madden stunned. Turan explained that it was repayment for the concern Madden had shown earlier. In return, he asked only for information. The mood shifted instantly, and Madden eagerly agreed. Time passed, and Turan prepared to leave the city. Armed with the knowledge he had gained, he set out for one final hunt. As he moved through the forest, he reflected on Madden's character, simple, sincere, and lacking the wariness his own teacher had possessed. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted. Something felt wrong. A faint scent in the air triggered a sense of unease. Hoping his instincts were mistaken, he rushed forward, following the trail. What he found confirmed his fears. The forest had fallen silent. Signs of struggle marked the area, and soon he came upon the first body. Recognition struck immediately. It was one of Madden's companions. As he moved further, more bodies appeared. Scattered across the ground, blood-stained coins lay among them. Unmistakable, finally he found Madden himself, seeing the lifeless figure of someone who had shown him kindness. Turan dropped to his knees. Shock gave way to a rising anger as he stared at the scene, trying to comprehend what had happened. Not far from the carnage, Turan discovered a man barely clinging to life, slumped weakly against a tree. With what little strength remained, the man tried to warn him, repeating a broken sound over and over. Turan knelt beside him, listening carefully. Through blood and effort, the man finally forced out a single word: rabbit. The warning seemed strange at first, but a disturbing sound nearby drew Turan's attention. Turning toward it, he saw the creature, a rabbit, its mouth soaked in blood as it fed. In an instant, the meaning became clear. This was no ordinary animal. The full horror revealed itself as Turan took in the clearing. Bodies lay torn apart, the ground stained with violence. At the center stood the source of it all, a massive, monstrous rabbit. Its fur was drenched in red, and its glowing eyes burned with hostility. Understanding the danger, Turan rose without hesitation. He could not leave such a creature alive. Before he could act further, the beast lunged. Its speed was overwhelming, kicking up dust as it closed the distance in a blink. Turan barely managed to evade the attack. Startled by how close it had come, the creature paused briefly, watching him. Turan acknowledged inwardly that he had nearly been struck. Without delay, he countered. A transparent shield formed before him, followed by a concentrated burst of energy that split into multiple projectiles. They shot toward the monster, but it dodged with unnatural agility, evading each strike with ease. It became clear that this enemy was far from ordinary. It was accustomed to combat, especially against ranged attacks. With a powerful stomp, the beast launched itself high into the air, casting a shadow over him as it descended with lethal intent. Yet when it struck the ground, Turan was no longer there, disoriented. The creature searched for him. In the next instant, Turan appeared above it, descending swiftly. A dagger drove deep into its neck while energy gathered in his other hand. The monster shrieked as blood erupted from the wound. Before it could recover, Turan vanished again, moving faster than the eye could follow. He reappeared once more and delivered a final, decisive strike. The force sent the creature crashing into the ground, the impact tearing through the surrounding forest. Dust and debris filled the air as the beast let out its final cry. When everything settled, the monstrous rabbit lay still. Its body twitched once before falling silent. Turan approached cautiously and extended his hand. As he absorbed its mana, a powerful green aura surged into him. The amount was far beyond what he expected, greater even than any creature he had faced before. The surge of power left him momentarily stunned. When it was over, he turned back to the wounded man who had witnessed the battle. The man, filled with awe, recognized what Turan was. Turan confirmed it without elaboration. When questioned about hiding his identity, he ignored it and instead asked about the fallen, whether any had families who should receive their belongings. The answer was no. As the man's life faded, his thoughts turned to Madden. That memory stirred something in Turan as well. He recalled a conversation about a distant city called Orem, known for its vast library filled with countless books. At the time, the mention had quietly caught his interest. What mattered more was that entry to such a place was reserved for mages alone. With that memory lingering, Turan buried the fallen hunters. Standing before their graves, he made a decision. His next destination would be Orem. Before leaving, he paused at Madden's grave and spoke his name softly, offering a quiet farewell. Then he turned away and began his journey once more. Time passed, and eventually, Turan arrived at a city far grander than anything he had seen before. Compared to this place, everything he had known seemed small. At its center stood a magnificent structure, surrounded by a thriving metropolis. Blending into the crowd, Turan approached the guarded gates. Security was strict, with every entrant carefully inspected. When his turn came, a guard stopped him, mocking his worn appearance and ordering him to clean himself before entering. Turan ignored the insult. His attention had already shifted upward toward a towering white structure entwined with strange vines. It had to be the library he had heard about. Determined, he approached its entrance. Where guards blocked his path, they informed him that only mages were permitted inside. Calmly, Turan stated that he was one. The claim was met with disbelief. One guard grew hostile, accusing him of lying and reaching out to stop him. Turan blocked the movement effortlessly. A faint glow began to emanate from his hand as he released a fraction of his power. The effect was immediate. A crushing pressure filled the space, overwhelming the guard and forcing him back until he collapsed. The realization struck quickly. This was no ordinary mage. Shaken, the guard introduced himself respectfully and asked about Turan's background. Turan avoided the question, implying it was unnecessary. The guard admitted as much. but explained that access to the library required permission from a noble house. Arrangements were made at once. Soon after, Turan found himself in an entirely unfamiliar situation. Instead of simply entering the library, he was treated as an honored guest. He sat in a luxurious bath, surrounded by attendants who carefully tended to him. The attention felt excessive and uncomfortable. Though he initially resisted, he eventually allowed them to continue, realizing refusal might cause them trouble. Once finished, he was dressed in fine clothing. His appearance transformed completely. Even the attendants seemed stunned by the change, though Turan himself remained unaware of the impression he now gave. The entire experience felt distant from anything he understood. Then the atmosphere shifted. A young woman with pink hair entered confidently. Her gaze moved over him with clear amusement as she remarked on the contrast between his earlier state and his current appearance. Introducing himself simply as Turan, he met her sharp curiosity with calm restraint. She gave her name as Azella, without hesitation. She pressed him for his origins, suspecting he was hiding something. Turan declined to answer directly, which only deepened her interest. A playful yet calculating look appeared in her eyes. Then, without warning, she released her power. A surge of golden-orange mana flooded the room, pressing down with immense force. The air itself seemed to tremble under its weight. Turan remained still, but the pressure was undeniable. A single drop of sweat traced down his face. Azella watched him closely, her challenge clear. He had been pushed into a corner, and there was only one way out, by revealing the true extent of his strength. The moment Turan sensed Azella's spirit force, he responded without hesitation. His own energy surged outward, meeting hers head-on. In an instant, the entire room was overwhelmed by the collision of their powers. The air grew dense, trembling under the pressure of their mana. A nearby guard quickly stepped forward to shield the maids. Yet even then, the force continued to spread through the chamber. After several tense seconds, Turan withdrew his energy. Azella followed suit, having already gauged his strength. Rather than appearing wary, she seemed almost delighted. She studied her own hands with quiet fascination, as if confirming something she had suspected all along. Then, with a playful expression, she made an unexpected remark about marriage, catching Turan completely off guard. His thoughts stalled, unable to process her words. Sensing his confusion, she brushed it off lightly, hinting that he should still consider it before turning and leaving with her guard. Left alone, Turan remained still. Unsettled by the exchange, looking at his hand, he could still feel the lingering tremor of their clash. A quiet thought surfaced. Her power matched his at the very least. It made him wonder whether such strength was common in this place. Soon after, he was brought before the lord of the city, a composed and calculating figure named Rugvoltus. The man welcomed him calmly and addressed his purpose. Many visitors came seeking hidden knowledge or power from the library, but he made it clear that no such secrets existed there. Turan listened carefully before replying that he had never expected such things to begin with. After a brief pause, Rugvoltus allowed him access, noting that nothing within the library posed a risk to his house. However, as it was already late, he instructed Turan to return the next day. Turan accepted this with quiet gratitude. When morning came, Turan approached the towering library. Its sheer scale stretched high into the sky, and as he stepped inside, he froze. Endless shelves of books surrounded him, rising in a vast circular structure that seemed to spiral upward without end. The air carried the weight of centuries of preserved knowledge. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. A young girl approached and introduced herself as the librarian appointed by the Lord. Despite her appearance, she spoke with confidence and authority, explaining the rules. Any damage would require compensation. No books could be taken outside, and she would be watching him at all times. Though surprised, Turan accepted this. When he asked if she had read the books herself, she confirmed it confidently and offered her help. Her blunt suggestions about what he might want to read caught him off guard, but he quickly clarified his goal. He wanted to understand the world itself. This time, she seemed genuinely surprised. Without delay, she gathered several books and placed them before him, explaining that while most were ancient, they would still provide useful knowledge. As Turan opened the first book, a quiet sense of wonder filled him. From that day onward, he returned to the library without fail, spending hours immersed in study. Gradually, the world that had once seemed vast and unknowable began to take shape in his mind. He learned about lands, races, customs, and the deeper principles of magic and history. Piece by piece, clarity replaced uncertainty. Time passed until one day he was summoned again by the Lord. Rugvaltus acknowledged his dedication, but reminded him that access to the library had been an act of goodwill. Now he expected something in return. Without hesitation, Turan agreed. The request was direct. A dangerous monster had appeared north of the city, attacking travelers and disrupting an important trade route. Even knights sent to deal with it had not returned. The situation required someone stronger. Turan accepted calmly, though he could not ignore the timing. The issue had begun before his arrival, making it clear why the Lord had granted him access so readily. Soon, a group was assembled to head north. Among them was Azella, leading with her usual confidence, and her brother Marvin, who introduced himself more formally. As they traveled, Azella spoke casually, while Marvin attempted to ease the tension with quiet conversation. Their journey was interrupted when they discovered the wreckage of a destroyed carriage. The scene bore clear signs of a violent attack. As others speculated, Turan studied the ground carefully. After a moment, he identified the culprit, a monkey-like creature, based on the tracks left behind. When asked about pursuing it, the others hesitated, lacking the necessary ability. Turan stepped forward, offering to track it himself. Focusing his senses, he followed the faint trail through the air, guiding the group toward a riverbank where the scent abruptly vanished. He concluded that the creature had washed itself, an unusual but deliberate act. Before anyone could fully process this, the scent returned, stronger and closer. Turan reacted instantly, warning the others. Behind them stood the monster. It was far larger than expected, roaring as it raised massive stones in its hands. Before the group could properly respond, it attacked. Chaos erupted as the stones crashed down, crushing soldiers and scattering the formation. Turan narrowly avoided the assault, regaining his footing as the battlefield fell into disarray. Around him lay fallen bodies, the cost of a single moment's hesitation. Azella barely shielded herself. Shouting for a counterattack, the remaining soldiers charged, but the monster suddenly turned as if to retreat. In that instant, Turan moved. With a single decisive strike, he unleashed a concentrated surge of energy. The attack tore through the air with overwhelming force, striking the creature before it could escape. The impact was absolute. When the dust settled, the monster was gone, completely destroyed. Silence followed. The survivors stood frozen, their eyes slowly turning toward Turan. He walked forward calmly, faint energy still radiating from him, marking the end of the battle in a single, effortless motion. After Turan bringing down the monster, Azella and her brother Marvin turned their attention to its fallen body below. Without any hesitation, Azella unleashed her power. A blazing serpent of fire erupted from her, surging forward and closing the distance in an instant. The moment it reached the creature, a violent explosion shook the area, marking the monster's end. Nearby soldiers, who had been bracing themselves moments earlier, finally exhaled in relief. The tension faded as they realized the battle was over. Despite the victory, the aftermath was chaotic. Injured soldiers groaned, some clutching broken limbs, others desperately calling for bandages or help to stop heavy bleeding. The battlefield had turned into a scene of urgency and disorder. Amidst it all, Turan quietly observed. Though relieved that no one had died, he couldn't ignore what he had seen. Even with enhanced bodies strengthened by mana, many had pushed weaker individuals forward as shields. To him, it felt like a battle that could have been handled far better. The moment passed, and Azella shifted the focus, encouraging everyone to absorb the mana released from the defeated monster. Turan joined them, confirming through experience what he had read before, that sharing the absorption didn't weaken its effects. However, both Azella and Marvin soon reached their limits. Unable to take in more, Marvin, in particular, couldn't help but notice Turan's unusual capacity and skill, silently acknowledging his exceptional talent. As they left the battlefield, the group reflected on the fight. It became clear that Turan had played a key role in defeating the monster, from tracking it to delivering the decisive blow. Still, he dismissed any praise, instead focusing on his own shortcomings, especially the fact that he had reacted too late to its initial attack. He explained the creature's abilities through careful observation and knowledge he had gained earlier from studying a monster encyclopedia in the library. Its physical traits had hinted at its powers, immense throwing strength and heightened vision. This explanation surprised the others, especially Marvin, who found it hard to believe such insight came from simply reading in a place few cared to visit. That same library soon became the focus again. Inside, Turan encountered its caretaker, a mysterious figure who greeted him with familiarity that immediately raised suspicion. Her casual manner didn't match the rigid social norms surrounding nobles. As Turan questioned her, it became clear she was no ordinary human. She revealed herself to be a spirit tied to the library itself, existing as its very essence. Her form was merely a convenient manifestation for communication. Only those with sufficiently developed bloodlines could perceive her, which explained why Turan alone could see her presence. Curious about himself, Turan allowed her to examine him. Through this, she identified fragments of multiple bloodlines within him, with the dominant ones being linked to pursuit and hunting. However, there was another bloodline that remained sealed, something that would only reveal itself as he grew stronger. This discovery led Turan to reflect on his past, particularly his mother, whose refined nature now seemed to hint at a hidden noble origin. Though the truth remained unclear, it gave him a direction to think about. From that point on, Turan's time in the library changed completely. Instead of passively reading, he actively learned from the spirit, gaining knowledge far beyond what books alone could offer. She taught him about the fundamental laws of the world, microscopic organisms, decay, light, heat, and the mechanics behind natural processes. Applying this understanding, Turan experimented with magic in a new way. By grasping the principles behind phenomena like decay, he managed to achieve results more efficiently, using far less mana than before. This realization reshaped his perspective, making him aware that knowledge itself was a powerful advantage, one that certain powerful families might be deliberately withholding. Eventually, Turan decided it was time to leave. Though the spirit expressed her reluctance, she was bound to the library and couldn't follow him. Still, she offered one final piece of advice, encouraging him to explore the land in search of other remnants of ancient knowledge. With that, Turan departed, carrying both what he had learned and a new purpose. Guided by information from the library, he set his sights on the Emerald Desert, the stronghold of House Zahar. There he hoped to uncover the truth about his origins and the mystery of his bloodline. As Turan continued his journey, the setting sun slowly covered the sky in deep shades of orange and crimson. The peaceful scenery gave him time to think. He reminded himself there was no reason to rush. If clues about his parents had survived for 18 years already, they would not suddenly vanish simply because he arrived a little later. The following day, he resumed traveling. Along the road, he encountered several corpses scattered across the area. Although the sight was grim, he stayed calm and continued forward, believing that whatever answers awaited him would remain there regardless of timing. Not long afterward, the sound of a horse reached his ears. Reacting instantly, Turan concealed himself within nearby bushes and carefully observed the situation ahead. An injured man lay on the ground, while a red horse stood protectively beside him. The animal suddenly charged toward a group of attackers with fierce determination, revealing that it was defending its owner rather than acting wildly. As Turan studied the scene, he realized the attackers were dark elves. They fought with strange and sinister abilities, channeling dark energy that caused nearby corpses to rise and twist into horrifying undead creatures. Remembering what he had once read, Turan recognized the technique as dark elf necromancy. At first, he hesitated. He did not yet know who had started the conflict. However, his doubts vanished the moment he witnessed the dark elves casually feeding on human remains. The horrifying sight confirmed their true nature. Without wasting another second, Turan activated his concealment ability and erased his presence before striking unexpectedly. One dark elf was instantly obliterated by the unseen attack, leaving the other stunned and confused. Realizing an invisible enemy was hunting him, the surviving dark elf ordered his undead beasts to surround him defensively. Another hidden strike followed, but this time, one of the creatures sacrificed itself to block the blow. The dark elf soon figured out that concealment magic was involved. In response, he summoned another creature capable of exposing hidden targets. A strange pulse spread across the battlefield, disrupting Turan's concealment and revealing his position. The moment Turan became visible, every summoned beast rushed toward him. Flames gathered rapidly in his hand as he prepared a counterattack. But the enemy creatures attacked relentlessly. A massive bull-like monster and a swift fox-like beast assaulted him from different directions. Though he narrowly avoided death, the fox still managed to bite into his leg. Before he could recover, the bull monster crashed into him with overwhelming force, hurling him into a tree. The impact left him badly injured and barely able to move. Watching his condition, the dark elf mocked him cruelly, convinced victory was already certain. At that critical moment, The red horse charged back into battle. It struck the dark elf directly, knocking him to the ground, and forcing all the summoned creatures to abandon Turan in order to protect their master. Furious and humiliated, the dark elf prepared to retaliate, but another sudden attack struck him before he could react. A powerful stone-based assault killed him instantly. With the necromancer dead, every summoned creature collapsed and disappeared, leaving the battlefield silent at last. Turan, exhausted and heavily wounded, struggled just to remain conscious. The horse slowly approached him, and he quietly expressed his gratitude while resting a hand against it. Later that night, the injured man finally regained consciousness. At first startled, he soon learned that Turan had rescued him from the dark elves. His attention quickly turned to the horse, Tilly, whose intelligence and loyalty had clearly saved his life as well. The young man introduced himself as Aziz of the Burke family. When Turan asked about the reason behind the attack, Aziz explained that he and his companions had simply been traveling when the dark elves ambushed them without warning. As he recalled the deaths of the knights and servants who had raised him since childhood, the grief overwhelmed him completely. Turan silently observed Aziz's sorrow and realized it was genuine. There was no deception in his emotions. Wanting to confirm the situation, Turan expanded his senses using his exploration ability and carefully scanned the area for any remaining threats. After a thorough search, he confirmed that no other dark elves were nearby. Their conversation continued, and Aziz became curious about Turan himself. Traveling alone despite such skill and power seemed unusual. Turan, however, downplayed his strength, admitting that he had struggled greatly even against a single necromancer, and had only survived because of the horse's intervention. As they spoke, Turan sensed something unusual. A faint blue energy emerged from himself, while a red aura radiated from Aziz, the two forces subtly clashing in the air between them. The strange reaction made Turan question Aziz's true capabilities. Despite appearing inexperienced, he had somehow survived an encounter with dangerous necromancers. Turan wondered whether combat instincts, hidden talent, or even a special bloodline might explain it. Eventually, Aziz made an offer. Since Turan had no immediate destination, he invited him to accompany him to the Burke family, as repayment for saving his life and escorting him safely home. Aziz promised that his family would craft a magic artifact specifically suited for him. He explained proudly that the Burke family served the great northern House Arabian and had spent generations creating enchanted artifacts. Turan listened carefully, silently considering whether accepting the invitation might benefit his journey ahead. After burying the fallen soldiers in the forest, Turan and Aziz stood quietly before the makeshift graves. Aziz admitted that he wished he could have returned the bodies to their homeland, but under the circumstances, such a thing was impossible. More than anything, he was grateful that Turan had not mocked him for openly grieving over his subordinates. Ever since childhood, Aziz had been taught that nobles should never display weakness. A true leader, according to those lessons, was supposed to continue forward without hesitation, even after sacrifice and loss. Yet after experiencing the deaths of those who had practically raised him, Aziz realized he could never accept that belief completely. If becoming strong meant abandoning compassion, then he would rather remain weak forever. Turan calmly told him that such feelings were not weakness at all, but kindness. Those simple words changed the atmosphere between them. Feeling more at ease, Aziz suggested they stop speaking so formally since they were close in age. With a genuine smile, he offered Turan his hand in friendship, and after a brief pause, Turan accepted it. Their handshake marked the beginning of a true bond between them. Not long after, they decided to rest before continuing their journey. Turan's attention was drawn to a large box attached to the horse, and Aziz happily revealed its purpose. Inside was a magical cooling container filled with fresh food purchased in the previous city. The enchanted storage preserved food for days, though some meals still needed reheating. Aziz then demonstrated several other magical tools he carried for travel, including a kettle capable of instantly producing hot water, a detection device that warned of approaching threats, and equipment designed to quickly construct temporary shelters from nearby wood. Even his clothing possessed self-cleaning enchantments. Turan admitted that such magical conveniences were impressive, especially since ordinary people rarely encountered artifacts like them. Aziz dismissed the praise casually, insisting that none of the items compared to the value of his own life. He even promised that his family would provide Turan with something far greater once they arrived home. As their conversation continued, Aziz became increasingly fascinated by Turan's abilities. He listed the incredible feats he had witnessed, controlling beasts, summoning lightning, and manipulating the battlefield itself. Unable to understand how one person could wield so many different forms of magic naturally, he wondered whether Turan possessed an extraordinary bloodline. Turan simply avoided the subject, claiming it all came naturally to him. Aziz laughed, assuming he was joking because such a bloodline sounded impossible. The discussion eventually shifted toward age, leading to an unexpected revelation. Turan calmly mentioned that he would soon turn 19, which completely shocked Aziz. Despite his youthful appearance, Aziz admitted that he himself was already 43 years old. Thinking about gifted individuals, Aziz brought up another genius from his family line, whose talent rivaled Turan's own. He spoke with obvious respect when mentioning Mesa, the future heir of House Arabian. She was considered a once-in-a-generation prodigy, someone born with overwhelming natural talent and destined to lead the powerful lineage. As they traveled across the plains, Aziz explained the structure of the great noble houses. Leadership was not simply inherited by birth order. It belonged to whoever proved strongest among the family members. Among all the children of the Arabian patriarch, Mesa stood above the rest. By the age of 21, she had already mastered numerous forms of combat and magic, while possessing a terrifying amount of mana. Turan asked whether special support from the family had contributed to her rapid growth. Aziz confirmed that she had inherited the mana of a powerful relative after his death, a privilege reserved for elite bloodlines. Hearing this, Turan finally understood how such noble families maintained their overwhelming dominance over the world. Eventually, they arrived at the plains of Dakin, located within the central territory of Arabian. Rising before them stood the magnificent white castle of House Burke Kavilan, a symbol of both authority and prestige. The moment they entered the estate, Aziz's mother rushed forward in relief, embracing her son after hearing of the dangers he had survived. Soon after, his stern father appeared as well, reminding Aziz to maintain noble composure despite his emotions. Regaining himself, Aziz formally introduced Turan as the man who had saved his life from the Dark Elves. The atmosphere changed the instant Aziz explained that necromancers had targeted him. Fury flashed across the matriarch's face at the thought that her only heir had nearly been killed. However, her anger gradually faded into cold indifference once she learned that Turan was merely the son of a commoner mother, and did not even know his father's identity. Though she promised him a reward, her attitude clearly shifted. Instead of welcoming him warmly into the estate, she suggested accommodations outside the main mansion. Aziz was visibly stunned by the lack of gratitude shown toward the person who had rescued him. Before the tension could worsen further, another voice interrupted the room. A young woman with dark hair stepped from the shadows, dismissing the unnecessary suspicion surrounding Turan. The moment she appeared, the entire room fell silent. Her pale skin, a motionless gaze, and overwhelming presence gave her an almost ghost-like aura. This was Mesa, the famed princess of Arabian. Turan studied her carefully and immediately sensed something unsettling. Despite her beauty and noble status, she resembled less a royal heir and more a living corpse drained of vitality. Mesa revealed that she had recently survived an assassination attempt carried out by enemies from House Vorm. The incident had forced her to temporarily remain within the Burke estate for safety. She even suspected that traitors existed within her own family, as many desired her downfall. Exhausted by the conversation, she soon excused herself and departed. Because of Mesa's intervention, the matriarch reluctantly agreed to prepare one of the finest guest rooms in the mansion for Turan. The following morning, Turan awoke in luxurious surroundings far beyond anything he had experienced before. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, illuminating the elegant decor of the room. After leaving to explore the mansion, he encountered Aziz wandering the halls as well. Their attention was briefly drawn toward the magical mechanisms built into the mansion, including enchanted lamps created by apprentice craftsmen. However, the peaceful atmosphere shattered when violent flashes of yellow light suddenly erupted outside. Turan moved toward the window and witnessed a breathtaking display of power. Aziz immediately recognized it as Mesa's training and explained that the phenomenon came from the legendary storm lineage of House Arabian. As Turan watched the lightning tearing across the sky, he felt something unusual stirring inside him. For the first time, he experienced genuine envy toward another bloodline. The sheer scale of Mesa's power made him wonder just how strong the future ruler of Arabian truly was. Aziz excitedly suggested they go watch more closely, though Turan hesitated, suspicious of drawing unnecessary attention to himself. Aziz admitted he had another reason for bringing him there. Long ago, he had trained alongside Mesa, and ever since then, a rivalry had lingered between them. Deep down, he wanted to witness her frustration at being challenged by someone extraordinary. Together, they headed toward the training grounds. When Mesa noticed them, she immediately questioned Turan's identity with cold indifference. Aziz awkwardly explained that they had only come to observe her training, though he couldn't resist teasing her about childhood memories in which she had once cried after losing to him in magic practice. While Aziz laughed, Mesa's irritation steadily grew. Then, shifting the conversation entirely, Aziz introduced Turan as a terrifying talent among mages and suggested something outrageous, a sparring match between the two. At those words, Mesa's eyes glowed with intense blue light. Instantly, overwhelming magical pressure engulfed the entire courtyard. Dark clouds formed above the mansion as enormous bolts of yellow lightning crashed around the training grounds. Mesa unleashed the true power of the storm lineage. Lightning spiraled around her body like a violent tempest under her complete control. The sheer pressure alone forced Turan to brace himself just to endure her presence. In that moment, he fully realized the immense gap between them. Then, just as quickly as it began, the storm disappeared. Mesa approached calmly, completely unaffected by the terrifying display she had unleashed moments earlier. Meanwhile, sweat covered Turan's body from simply withstanding her aura. Finally, Mesa spoke. Her words carried neither arrogance nor anger, only cold certainty. From her perspective, Turan simply was not strong enough to stand against her in battle. Aziz quickly stepped between Turan and Mesa, arguing that while Turan could not rival her overwhelming raw magical power, his true strength lay elsewhere. According to Aziz, Turan possessed an extraordinary ability to understand and learn magic itself, a talent so rare that even Mesa might not surpass him in that regard. Hearing such praise directed toward a complete outsider immediately caught Mesa's attention. With her usual cold and emotionless demeanor, she decided to test Turan personally, since a direct battle would obviously favor her overwhelming mana reserves. Turan proposed a different kind of contest. Each of them would demonstrate a spell unfamiliar to the other, and the winner would be whoever managed to reproduce the opponent's magic first. Even Aziz admitted that the challenge sounded fair and interesting. Mesa accepted without hesitation, though she intentionally excluded bloodline magic from the contest. As far as she knew, Turan did not even understand the true nature of his own lineage, so using such abilities against him would have been unfair from the start. Choosing to demonstrate first, Mesa calmly activated her spell. A tiny sprout suddenly emerged from the ground before violently bursting upward. In an instant, the rapidly growing vines wrapped around Aziz and lifted him high into the air. While Aziz complained helplessly about being suspended above the courtyard, Mesa ignored him entirely and asked Turan whether he could replicate plant creation and manipulation magic. Instead of answering immediately, Turan quietly studied the vines. Then he crouched and placed his hand against the ground while analyzing the spell itself. To him, fire magic was simply an expression of combustion, while water magic merely gathered invisible moisture already present in the air. Following that logic, Mesa's plant spell was not truly creating life from nothing. It was simply accelerating the growth of seeds that already existed beneath the soil. The explanation visibly surprised Mesa. She realized that Turan had grasped the true principle of her spell almost instantly despite never witnessing it before. When he confirmed that this was indeed his first time seeing such magic, Mesa reluctantly acknowledged that Aziz's praise might not have been exaggerated after all. Now it was Turan's turn. However, he immediately understood the danger of using abilities tied to the Zahar bloodline. Revealing such powers openly within the Arabian domain could easily place him in mortal danger. Instead, he looked toward a nearby flower bed and extended his hand. A small mouse suddenly darted out from the flowers and into view. At first, Mesa dismissed it as nothing more than simple animal control magic. But then Turan grasped the mouse, and deep blue magical energy began surrounding the creature. Moments later, the mouse's body visibly started decaying while still alive, rapidly rotting before their eyes. The sight immediately silenced Mesa. She instinctively understood that what Turan had done was not ordinary spell casting. There was some hidden principle behind it that she could not comprehend. Turan calmly implied that the demonstration alone should be enough to settle the challenge. However, Mesa refused to accept defeat so easily. Determined to reproduce the same effect, she grabbed another mouse and poured enormous magical power into it. Golden mana surged violently around her as she forced the phenomenon into existence through sheer power alone. At first, nothing happened, but eventually the mouse did begin to rot, proving that she had technically succeeded. The problem was the horrifying amount of mana required. Since Mesa did not understand the underlying principle behind the phenomenon, she could only brute force the result through overwhelming magical energy. As is celebrated excitedly the moment the spell worked, but Mesa herself was already collapsing from exhaustion. Her body could no longer support itself after draining nearly all of her mana. As rushed toward her in panic, while Turan quietly observed her condition. To him, the situation seemed strange. Simple mana exhaustion alone should not have caused such severe weakness. Then, after noticing the state of her body more carefully, he realized something important. Mesa was incredibly frail, frighteningly light to the point that carrying her felt like lifting a small animal rather than a person. It seemed she had been barely sustaining her own body through magic from the very beginning. Turan immediately instructed Aziz to prepare salt and water while carrying Mesa back to her room. Much later, Mesa finally regained consciousness. Members of the Burke family questioned her anxiously, wondering whether Turan had somehow harmed her during training. However, Mesa calmly clarified that the collapse had been entirely her own fault. Exhausted and suffering from a splitting headache, she asked only to rest alone. Before leaving, the Burke family head gently encouraged her to at least try eating something despite her usual refusal to eat properly because of her magical condition. Though Mesa remained silent at first, she quietly thanked her once she reached the doorway. After everyone left, Mesa stared silently at the soup placed beside her bed. Yet the moment she tried to eat, horrifying memories surfaced in her mind. Visions connected to her mother and younger sister, desperately begging her for something she could not forget. The bowl slipped from her hands and shattered across the floor as she trembled violently beneath the weight of those memories. Meanwhile, elsewhere within the Burke estate, Turan found himself confined inside the temple of the lame goddess under observation. Watching over him was Limburg, a stern swordsman who repeatedly emphasized how impossible escape would be due to the temple's reinforced walls and doors. Turan calmly assured him that he had no intention of escaping, though Limburg continued insisting upon the strength of the structure with almost excessive seriousness. Not long afterward, Limburg suddenly began practicing swordsmanship directly in front of him. Every thrust and slash flowed naturally into the next, without a single wasted movement. Watching carefully, Turan realized he was witnessing the discipline of a truly trained warrior. Limburg soon questioned him directly about what he had observed. Turan simply admitted that the movements looked impressive. In response, Limburg spoke about how many nobles dismissed weapon mastery as inferior because magic was easier and more convenient. In his eyes, such people relied on magic only because their bodies and wills were weak. Turan responded calmly that, in most cases, specializing in magic truly was more efficient unless one possessed a bloodline suited for physical combat. However, he also acknowledged that real battle often forced people into situations where magic alone could not solve everything. Those words seemed to satisfy Limburg. Without hesitation, he handed Turan the weapon he had been using. When Turan questioned whether it was wise to arm someone being treated as suspicious, Limburg dismissed the concern entirely. To him, a blade was merely iron unless wielded properly by the person holding it. Accepting the weapon, Turan adjusted his stance under Limburg's steady gaze. The instant he prepared himself, deep blue magical energy began spreading around his body, signaling the start of something far more dangerous than simple sword practice. Liam suddenly shouted for Turan to stop pouring more magic power into the blade. While correcting Turan's posture, he explained the proper principle behind wielding the weapon. He instructed him to place his center of gravity on the front leg, raise his arm properly, and overcome the blade's weight through physical control rather than magic. Turan respectfully acknowledged the lesson, and Liam praised his understanding. He then ordered Turan to repeat the movement 10 times without interrupting his breathing. Liam explained that breath had to flow into the muscles naturally during combat. He also remarked that Turan's body was already quite impressive and insisted that he should dedicate real time to physical training whenever possible. Liam continued by explaining that although magic power was the greatest weapon available to wizards, the body remained the true foundation. A warrior who had tempered the body through countless hardships could dominate a battlefield, even without magic. He wanted Turan to understand the difference between relying on magic alone and mastering the body itself. As Turan prepared to continue training, the doors of the goddess temple opened. The head of the Burke family entered personally after learning from Mesa that Turan had not been responsible for her collapse. She had come to apologize to him directly. Turan responded humbly and insisted that he should be the one apologizing instead. As a guest, he believed his earlier actions had been somewhat inappropriate. Even so, the family head explained that Mesa still wished to apologize properly and asked whether Turan had time to meet her. When Turan met Mesa, she expressed deep regret after hearing that he had been confined to the temple because of her condition. Turan calmly explained that the confinement had merely been a necessary process and that he was simply relieved she was unharmed. Once that matter was settled, Mesa shifted the conversation toward the magic Turan had used the previous day. She questioned whether the spell that caused animals to rot was some undisclosed bloodline magic, because the amount of power required to cast it was unbelievable. Turan clarified that it was not bloodline magic at all. He explained that anyone who understood the principle behind it could use the spell rather easily. That answer immediately sparked Mesa's curiosity, and she eagerly requested that Turan teach her the secret. She proposed an exchange. If Turan revealed the principle behind the spell, then she would teach him one of the Arabian family's secret arts in return. Seeing her enthusiasm, Turan accepted the offer. He carefully explained the exact principle behind the magic, and before long Mesa understood the truth behind it. The spell's foundation was actually a strengthening spell meant for living organisms, except the target being strengthened was an invisible microorganism. Because Mesa did not even know microorganisms existed, her own efficiency with the spell had been terribly poor. Although she had eventually succeeded, she realized that her method had been nothing more than brute force. Even while admitting that her magical technique fell slightly behind Turan's, Mesa still asked him to tell Aziz that their earlier competition had ended in a draw. She truly did not want Aziz becoming unbearably smug over a victory. Turan agreed without hesitation, and Mesa prepared to reveal the secret art she had promised in return. She picked up a comb and slowly brushed it through her hair, while explaining that objects rubbing together created an attractive force. Before she could finish her explanation, Turan immediately identified it as static electricity. His answer genuinely shocked her. For a moment she stood there speechless, wondering whether Turan had already understood the mystery long ago. Eventually, she praised the secret art itself as extremely profound, though she admitted she never expected Turan to already know it. Unable to think of another secret art that Turan did not already understand, Mesa proposed something else instead. Until she had properly repaid him, she wanted him to train alongside her. She firmly clarified that this arrangement existed only to settle her debt and not because she personally needed him nearby. Turan accepted immediately, and the two agreed to meet every evening in the garden for training. That night, the dinner table overflowed with luxurious dishes. The Burke family modestly claimed it was not much, though they encouraged everyone to eat and drink to their heart's content. Aziz sat beside Turan in complete confusion. He could not understand why his mother had prepared such an extravagant meal. He had never witnessed such treatment even on his own birthday. To him, it looked as though the Lord of Arabian himself had come to visit. From that reaction alone, Turan realized this dinner was far from ordinary. During the meal, Aziz's mother returned to the earlier subject regarding the reward promised for saving Aziz's life. She asked Turan what kind of magical item he desired. Turan answered honestly and explained that he wanted something useful for defense. He believed harming others with magic was relatively simple, but protecting oneself was far more difficult. If possible, he wanted a magical item capable of defending him against sudden attacks. Those words caused Aziz's mother to pause thoughtfully. She admitted she had created similar items before, but she currently had none prepared. Aziz immediately volunteered to make one himself, though his mother rejected the idea outright because she refused to let the Burke family lose face through poor craftsmanship. At that moment, another nearby wizard raised his hand and offered to take on the task instead. He explained that he had recently completed a commission from the main house and currently had spare time available. The head of the Burke family asked how he intended to approach the project. The wizard explained that if the item's purpose was defense against sudden attacks, then it should be something Turan could always carry on his body. He proposed crafting the magical item into an ornament, such as a ring, necklace, or earring, so that the bloodline's defensive power could activate instantly whenever danger appeared. The only drawback was that the item would require an entire month to complete. The family head proudly praised his craftsmanship and admitted that although it might seem excessive to boast about one's own child, Mello was genuinely an outstanding wizard. She stated that his skills in magical item creation were not far beneath her own. In essence, Turan realized he would receive an item forged over an entire month by a craftsman nearly equal to the head of a family renowned for generations of magical artisans. Feeling overwhelmed, Turan gratefully asked whether such treatment was not far too generous. The family head calmly answered that compared to her son's life, it was not excessive in the slightest. She then instructed Turan to remain with the Burke family as an honored guest for the next month and to stay without worry. Later, Aziz explained that his mother clearly liked Turan quite a lot. He revealed that she had even spent much of the previous night discussing Turan with him. Aziz pointed out that Turan's magical talent rivaled Mesa's and, more importantly, that he had never been lazy in training. Because of that, his mother wished to recruit Turan into the Burke family. Aziz jokingly explained the process. First, she would shower him with favors until he felt indebted. Then she would introduce him to a beautiful young woman. According to Aziz, many wizards had joined the Burke family exactly that way. Hearing that made Turan feel the entire situation would become troublesome, though Aziz quickly reassured him not to worry. He insisted the magical item was merely a small gift meant to please him, and that nobody would force him into marriage because his mother was not that tasteless. Aziz then asked how Turan planned to spend the rest of the day. Turan answered that he had already promised to train with Lady Mesa that evening. The moment Aziz heard the training would not happen until evening, he immediately wrapped an arm around Turan and declared there was still plenty of time left in the day. He insisted on taking Turan out on patrol. Aziz explained that although Zavalin was not the capital, the city still had countless enjoyable places worth seeing. However, when Turan admitted he actually wanted to spend the day quietly practicing magic alone, Aziz grabbed him by the collar and dragged him away anyway, while insisting that life was short and meant to be enjoyed. Not long afterward, they arrived at a casino. When Aziz realized Turan showed absolutely no interest in gambling, he began enthusiastically introducing one attraction after another throughout the city. During those introductions, Turan suddenly noticed something unusual. A large illustrated poster hung upon a nearby wall, and the man drawn on it looked astonishingly similar to Cain. Yet, despite the resemblance, the expression on the poster felt completely different. Soon afterward, the pair entered a theater where a stage performance was underway. The play told the story of warriors from Arabian battling within the demon desert. The central figure was a knight named Cain, who endured an unimaginably brutal conflict before ultimately repelling all invading enemies with almost divine power. After the performance ended, Aziz applauded enthusiastically and asked Turan for his thoughts. Turan sincerely praised the story as incredible and remarked that Cain's humility must truly have been unmatched because the man himself once described his life as nothing more than that of an ordinary knight. That only made Turan look forward even more to meeting Cain again someday. When they reunited, he fully intended to ask whether the story had truly happened. Early the next morning, Turan opened his eyes and silently stared at the familiar figure standing beside his bed. Liam was there once again with the same unwavering gaze, squatting stiffly nearby. Without wasting time, Liam explained that he had already recognized the potential in Turan's body the previous day. Because of that, he wanted Turan to begin training with him seriously. Liam insisted that strength could never be gained while lying around resting. According to him, the only path forward was constant tempering. Since Turan already understood that training would benefit him more than leisure ever could, he accepted without complaint. At that moment, Aziz suddenly opened the door, while excitedly mentioning some excellent performance happening that day. However, the instant he saw his uncle standing there with that intimidating expression, his entire attitude changed. Liam calmly declared that he and Turan were about to begin training, and suggested that Aziz should strengthen his weak body as well. Aziz immediately refused in panic. He claimed he had only recently returned from going out and still had not recovered. The moment he finished speaking, he fled the room in terror. Turan found Aziz's reaction completely baffling. However, once he personally experienced Liam's training, he finally understood the reason behind Aziz's panic. As Turan's body trembled violently from exhaustion, Liam coldly asked whether he could not hear his own body screaming. He declared that anyone incapable of enduring such pain would eventually become ruled by bodily weakness. Even then, Liam insisted there was still one final exercise remaining. By the time that so-called last exercise ended, Turan collapsed onto the ground in complete exhaustion. Liam casually asked whether he was tired, and Turan admitted he was indeed exhausted. Liam smiled faintly and explained that Turan should actually be grateful for being a wizard because this level of training barely qualified as sufficient. Confused, Turan asked whether things would truly differ for ordinary people. Liam explained that no matter how hard ordinary humans trained, age would eventually weaken them. Because of that, they needed constant effort simply to maintain their bodies. Wizards, however, were entirely different. Magic naturally preserved their bodies in peak condition. Once training produced results, time itself could no longer easily erode those gains. Afterward, Liam bluntly declared that Turan had already rested enough and ordered him to begin learning weapon combat immediately. As training continued, the strain of tearing muscles forced Turan to cry out repeatedly in pain. Life within the Burke family quickly became overwhelming yet fulfilling for him. Every morning he trained his body and weapons under Liam's brutal instruction. Every evening he returned to practice magical techniques alongside Mesa again and again. Without realizing it, 3 entire weeks passed. One evening, a bolt of lightning struck just beside the center of a target. Turan sighed in frustration after missing yet again. Mesa observed that he was struggling far more than expected. Turan could only answer helplessly that he simply was not from Arabian. Although Mesa genuinely wanted to help him improve, she did not know how to explain lightning magic properly. For her, lightning naturally struck its target the instant she released it. At that moment, another voice suddenly called out to Mesa. The owner of the voice soon approached them and briefly glanced toward Turan before asking who he was. Mesa immediately stepped protectively in front of Turan and coldly replied that the matter did not concern him. She also reminded him that she had already informed the main house not to disturb her during her periods of rest. The man calmly explained that the family head was summoning her urgently. The reason quickly became clear. Dark elves had already begun rampaging across the southern regions. 3 cities had already fallen into their hands, and now they were even gathering an expeditionary army. The moment Turan heard that news, his expression instantly darkened. After hearing the entire report, Mesa calmly stated that she understood and instructed them to inform the others that she would return soon. She then turned toward Turan and explained that she needed to leave. Before departing, Mesa suddenly remembered the payment she still intended to collect for teaching. Right afterward, she clasped her hands together and looked directly at Turan, before asking whether he knew that electricity also flowed through the human body. Turan responded in confusion, clearly unable to understand what she meant by electricity. Mesa calmly realized that he truly did not know. She explained that such knowledge belonged to the secret teachings of the Arabian house and suggested that she would consider their debt settled if she taught it to him properly. According to her, the knowledge would become an enormous help in the future. Turan thought about it briefly before agreeing. With that settled, Mesa began explaining everything she knew in a steady and composed tone. She revealed that whenever a person saw, heard, smelled, or felt something, tiny electrical signals traveled through the body toward the brain. If the sensation came through the eyes, the signal traveled from the eyes to the brain. If it came from smell, then the signal moved from the nose to the brain instead. She continued describing the entire process in detail, revealing knowledge that felt both mysterious and profound. Turan listened carefully to every single word without losing focus for even a moment. As he tried to understand the concept more deeply, he slowly closed his eyes and repeated the idea within his mind. A tiny electrical signal. He continued analyzing her explanation carefully. Electricity flowed throughout the entire human body. If he could somehow accelerate the electrical signals moving through those pathways, then perhaps he could enhance his own reactions and movements. As those thoughts lingered in his mind, a visible change suddenly appeared. Faint electricity began spreading across his face at first, weak and unstable. However, the current rapidly intensified. In the very next moment, his eyes began glowing with crackling, thunder-like energy. The atmosphere around him suddenly fell into complete silence, as though the entire world had frozen beneath the overwhelming surge of power. Standing before him, Mesa calmly observed the transformation and asked how he felt. Turan remained frozen in place, almost dazed, as though he had entered an entirely unfamiliar state of existence. Inside his mind, only a single confused thought echoed repeatedly. "What is this?" Suddenly, an intense pain exploded through his head. He immediately grabbed it while struggling to endure the violent headache caused by the overwhelming sensation flooding his body. Even then, Mesa remained calm and casually explained that he had successfully achieved it. She stated that the severe headache came from recklessly pouring out too much mana all at once. According to her, controlling it properly would remain difficult for now because of the pain. However, once he adapted to the sensation, he would eventually be able to maintain the state for long periods of time. Turan could barely process everything he was experiencing. Even while trying to understand the phenomenon, he admitted that the knowledge she had given him felt far more valuable than anything he had provided in return. Hearing that, Mesa revealed a faint, amused smile before slowly rising into the air. She explained that this was merely an investment because Turan clearly possessed talent. She fully intended to collect everything back in the future once he learned even greater spells. With those final words, Mesa swiftly flew away and vanished from sight in an instant. The scene gradually shifted afterward. A clear sky stretched endlessly overhead, calm and peaceful in complete contrast to the events that had just unfolded. Far below, however, a massive crowd had gathered together in a single location. The atmosphere carried both unrest and anticipation. This place was revealed to be Morgan City, the center of the Day Plains. An enormous gathering filled the area, and every single person shouted slogans together in unison. Their voices echoed powerfully through the air. From nearby conversations, the atmosphere became even clearer. Although this event was supposedly just a departure ceremony to hunt dark elves, the excitement made it feel more like a grand victory parade. The crowd's enthusiasm overwhelmed the entire city. As one observer continued speaking, his gaze suddenly shifted forward and landed upon a figure riding horseback through the gathering. Excitement immediately spread across his face as he called out toward Mason. Before he could continue further, however, another man firmly grabbed his hand and reminded him to maintain the composure expected of a noble. Ashes attempted to respond emotionally by calling out to his father, though his words faltered midway as though he could not fully express his feelings. At that moment, a loud announcement echoed throughout the area, declaring the arrival of the head of the house. Instantly, the atmosphere changed. The soldiers present snapped into attention with perfect discipline, standing motionless in absolute unity. Watching the scene unfold, Turan quietly realized that the man before him was Bital Arabian, the current head of the Arabian house. Even from a distance, the man's striking blue eyes stood out clearly. Yet despite the overwhelming presence surrounding him, something about his condition appeared strange. Turan quietly observed that the head of the house looked terribly pale and wondered whether his health had begun failing. Ashes explained that rumors claimed Batal Arabian had once suffered severe injuries while fighting the head of the Zahar house long ago. However, because the incident happened many years earlier, he believed old age might also be contributing to his condition. On the opposite side, the head of the family slowly raised his hand. The response from the soldiers came instantly. Every man moved together as one, their unity flawless. Soon afterward, all eyes turned upward toward the sky. An ominous sight unfolded overhead as spreading darkness consumed the heavens entirely. The atmosphere grew increasingly terrifying, weighed down by unbearable tension. Within the black clouds, golden thunder began crackling violently across the sky, illuminating the darkness with brilliant flashes. Everyone stared upward in complete awe. Soon the crowd erupted into loud chants once more, their devotion unwavering as they praised Arabian, the Lord of Thunder, and begged for protection over his descendants. Watching the overwhelming display before him, Turan understood the terrifying scale of Arabian's power. Even while suffering from such poor physical condition, Batal Arabian could still cover the entire region effortlessly with his magic. To Turan, this represented the absolute pinnacle of power a human being could achieve. Deep within himself, he silently vowed that one day he would reach that same height. The scene shifted once again afterward. This time, a person extended a bracelet forward while explaining its functions. Simply wearing the bracelet slightly increased physical stamina. If mana was poured into it, the enhancement became even greater. At full power, the boost could supposedly raise someone to a level comparable to nobles possessing guardian bloodlines. However, the speaker also warned that the item consumed enormous amounts of mana and therefore could not be maintained for too long. Turan stared at the bracelet in amazement and praised it as an extraordinary treasure. He believed an object of such quality would remain rare even among the great houses. To him, it was an exceptionally well-crafted magical item. At that moment, Aziz's aunt gently asked whether Turan had any interest in formally joining their house, repeating a topic previously mentioned before. Without hesitation, Turan respectfully declined. Although deeply grateful for the offer, he believed such a commitment would be difficult for him. The aunt calmly nodded in understanding and explained that she had already heard from Ashes about Turan's circumstances. According to those stories, Turan still had far too many things left to accomplish, making it impossible for him to settle in one place for long. She asked him only to view her offer as the lingering attachment of an old woman. Hearing those words, Turan sincerely promised that he would never forget the kindness and hospitality he had received from the Barak family. He declared that Ashes and the Barak family would always remain his friends. The aunt looked at him gently and answered that such words were more than enough. Soon afterward, Turan finally prepared to leave. As he stepped outside, he discovered both the instructor and Ashes waiting to see him off. At that moment, a knight approached him and tossed over a weapon while explaining that it was a magical device. Although it lacked major functions, it possessed excellent durability and an extremely sharp blade. Turan caught the weapon and sincerely thanked him before storing it carefully inside his space. Afterward, he turned respectfully toward the instructor and finally addressed him as master. The instructor merely smiled in response. Not long afterward, he departed without another word. Ashes, however, still remained nearby. He stepped forward and handed Turan a full set of clothes. Confused, Turan asked what they were. Ashes reminded him that he once said he admired those clothes. He explained that the fabric resisted dirt naturally and could even repair itself when lightly torn. The set included both a shirt and pants prepared entirely for Turan. Turan looked genuinely surprised by the gift. Seeing that reaction, Ashes smiled warmly and explained that Turan had become a true friend to him. Not only had Turan saved his life, but spending time together and witnessing the way Turan lived had given him much to think about. After a brief silence, Ashes asked where Turan planned to go next. Turan simply answered that he would head east first. Hearing that, Ashes let out a long breath and mentioned that he had traveled toward Carmine before as well. He warned Turan to avoid ships if possible because the waves there were absolutely terrible. According to him, even wine glasses danced violently during the journey. As Turan continued walking down the road afterward, he quietly thought about the reality awaiting him. To reach the land of Zahar and the El Rel Desert, he would eventually have to endure those violent waves. Deep down, however, he knew he could never openly admit that destination yet. Instead, another memory echoed through his mind. Someone once told him that a stubborn person like him would never starve to death anywhere and ordered him to return safely so he could repay the debt for the cloak he borrowed. Back then, Turan simply answered yes. Now, he continued moving forward without stopping. The journey carried him across countless places, each step taking him farther away from everything familiar. As he walked alone once again, a thought surfaced within his mind. Shall we run? The very next moment, he exploded forward with incredible speed. He dashed through crowds so quickly that people could only turn their heads in shock as he passed like a fleeting shadow. His speed was extraordinary. Maintaining that same momentum, he crossed the entire city, passed through wide stretches of land, and continued onward until he finally stopped far away in the distance. For the first time in a while, he stood still. Raising his eyes, he saw a massive mountain towering before him. After taking a deep breath to steady himself, he immediately began walking straight toward it without hesitation. As he ventured deeper into the area, something suddenly caught his attention. He paused slightly and sharpened his senses. At first, he believed he smelled a campfire nearby. Almost immediately afterward, however, he realized the scent was far worse. It was the smell of burning flesh. Moving closer, the horrifying truth slowly revealed itself. He arrived at a completely devastated settlement. The houses had all burned into blackened ruins, and lifeless bodies lay scattered everywhere across the area. A heavy silence of destruction filled the surroundings completely. Seeing the devastation, Turan's thoughts darkened. He wondered whether bandits had attacked the village because dark elves should not have reached a place this far away. As he carefully moved through the ruined settlement, the sight of the destroyed homes left him deeply unsettled. Quiet sadness slowly settled within him as he took in the tragedy. After some time, he stepped inside one of the damaged houses. While searching through the interior, he discovered a basement. Without hesitation, he attempted to open it. After struggling briefly, the door finally gave way. Inside, he found a young girl huddled in fear. The small child immediately burst into tears the moment the basement opened. Terrified by the sudden intrusion, she trembled uncontrollably. Turan quickly moved toward her while raising his hands calmly to show he meant no harm. In a gentle voice, he reassured her that he was not an enemy and had come to help. Still shaking with fear, the child hesitantly asked whether that was truly the case. Turan gently confirmed it before asking what had happened there. Fighting through her terror, the girl finally managed to explain that a mage had killed everyone. Hearing that answer, Turan repeated the word mage in visible surprise. Before the child could continue speaking further, however, she suddenly lost consciousness and collapsed. Turan immediately caught her and checked her condition carefully. Fortunately, nothing appeared seriously wrong. He realized she was most likely simply exhausted after remaining trapped inside the basement for so long. His first priority became getting the child somewhere safe. Carefully lifting her into his arms, he carried her outside. However, the moment he stepped out of the ruined building, sharp tension instantly filled the air. Someone had already aimed a weapon directly at him. A girl stood in the distance with a drawn bow, her arrow pointed straight toward Turan. Coldly, she declared that she had finally found him. Her presence radiated danger, and it appeared she possessed control over both fire and ice. Raising her voice sharply, she ordered him onto his knees while accusing him of being a murderous bastard. It was immediately obvious that she had completely misunderstood the situation. Even so, despite the threat and accusation, Turan remained calm and composed without showing the slightest trace of panic. The archer continued pointing her bow toward him, while furiously calling him a murderer. Yet even after hearing her accusations repeatedly, Turan never lost his composure for even a single moment. On the opposite side, the archer Visen shouted in anger and disbelief, unable to accept that after such a massacre someone would even try to take away a child. Beside her, the fire mage warned Turan not to move, threatening him with another attack. Turan calmly tried to explain that everything was a misunderstanding, but before he could finish, the nervous mage accidentally unleashed his spell. Flames rushed straight toward Turan and the little girl, causing a violent explosion. Visen immediately scolded the mage, horrified that a child had almost been caught in the blast. But when the smoke cleared, everyone froze. Turan stood unharmed, blocking the attack with one hand after activating his artifact. Not even a scratch marked his body. The group stared at him in disbelief, unable to understand what kind of defensive power he possessed. Keeping his composure, Turan warned them once more that he was not responsible for destroying the village. If they attacked again, he would no longer hold back. The cold confidence in his voice unsettled Visen, especially after seeing the little girl safely standing beside him. Realizing his actions did not match those of a murderer, she lowered her weapon and introduced herself as Visen. When Turan suggested asking the child once she woke up, Visen learned the girl had seen the real criminal. Turan admitted he knew nothing about the culprit, so Visen explained the rumors surrounding a mysterious arsonist who had spent months burning isolated villages and killing everyone inside. The little girl then described a frightening man in a red cloak with a beard like a lumberjack. Understanding their mistake, Visen and her companions apologized sincerely. Turan respected their sense of duty and calmly asked if they were hunting the arsonist. Visen confirmed it and revealed that their tracker, Usha, could now find him using the new description. She also asked Turan to join the hunt, offering him the entire reward while she only wanted the mission's merit. After hearing that the arsonist was strong enough to kill several knights, Turan became interested and agreed. First, they brought the orphaned child to safety and left money for her care. The group later returned to the ruined village, where Usha carefully searched for traces. She explained that she tracked the culprit through footprints and the scent of ash that still clung to his clothes. Eventually, she found the trail and guided everyone into a quiet mountain region. Near a dark cave, Visen asked the others to stay back while she and Turan moved ahead with glowing spheres lighting the path. Usha sensed a single person inside. Soon, they came face to face with the man they had been searching for. The stranger acted calm and innocent, but when questioned about the burned villagers, he suddenly attacked. Flames exploded through the cave, throwing several people backward. Turan instantly activated his artifact again, protecting both himself and Visen. Taking advantage of the opening, Visen fired an arrow into the mage's leg, forcing him down. In response, the arsonist revealed an earth manipulation bloodline, raising massive stone hands from the ground to attack Turan. Turan countered with a powerful rock shot that shattered one of the giant hands before following up with lightning magic. The bolt struck the enemy directly, sending him collapsing to the ground in agony. While Visen checked on the others, Turan restrained the fallen mage with rapidly growing plants, sealing his movement and sight. Holding a blade against the man's neck, he demanded answers. When the mage refused to speak, Turan stabbed his knee and coldly questioned why a noble would burn innocent villagers alive. Broken by pain and fear, the arsonist finally confessed. He claimed that God had ordered him to burn sinners so he could gain new bloodlines, believing the sacrifices would eventually grant him flame powers. The confession horrified everyone. Visen saw it as pure madness, unable to believe someone could justify massacres for such a delusion. But for Turan, the words triggered memories and connected with things he had heard before about gaining power through killing. As the crazed mage continued rambling about obtaining the flame bloodline, Turan's anger deepened. In that moment, he began to suspect the man's insanity might actually hide a terrifying truth about how power worked in their world. Without hesitating, Turan immediately beheaded the dark magician. The corpse dropped lifelessly onto the cave floor, leaving several people disturbed by the brutality. One injured man compared the scene to slaughtering livestock, but Vissen quickly shut down any sympathy. In her eyes, the murderer deserved far worse for everything he had done to innocent villagers. As the others recovered, Turan quietly prepared to leave. Before exiting, one of the companions discovered a strange book near the body and handed it to him. While flipping through the pages, Turan realized the formulas inside were unlike anything he had ever seen. He began wondering if the mysterious god mentioned by the arsonist had truly taught him forbidden magic. Soon after, Vissen called everyone together, and the group absorbed mana using their own techniques. Later, news of the arsonist's capture spread quickly. A man praised Vissen, claiming House Carmine had gained a rising star. She modestly accepted the compliment before speaking privately with Turan about the dead mage's confession. Turan assured her he would keep silent, knowing the truth could throw the world into chaos if revealed carelessly. The group eventually parted ways. Vissen and her companions continued monster hunting, while Turan decided to travel directly toward Abaja. Alone once again, he crossed into a humid desert region where he noticed changes in his magic. Fire abilities became weaker and consumed more mana, while water magic formed with remarkable ease. The environment itself clearly affected elemental power. Later, Turan arrived at a busy port town filled with ships preparing for dangerous voyages across the Enriel Desert. Sailors complained about deadly merfolk creatures attacking ships with harpoons, while pirates made every journey even worse. Hearing this, Turan approached a one-eyed captain and asked about traveling to the desert. The captain initially refused because the ship lacked space and resources, but Turan demonstrated his strength by using magic on a nearby cup, instantly changing the crew's attitude. Once they realized he was a powerful knight, the captain treated him with respect. Turan then offered to work as a guard during the voyage instead of traveling as a passenger. Since he only wanted passage to the Enriel Desert, he accepted even the poor conditions without complaint. Not long after, Turan officially joined the crew. Meanwhile, far away, another battle unfolded. Dark elves launched a brutal attack on a settlement, overwhelming the defenders. Just as the situation became desperate, golden lightning struck across the battlefield and wiped out the monsters instantly. Mesa appeared from the fading light and calmly took command of the situation. Vice Captain Kadramian checked on her safety, reminding her that her life was more valuable than ordinary knights. Mesa ignored the concern and focused only on the progress of the battle and the hidden enemy tunnels. Watching her leave, Kadramian bitterly blamed her reckless upbringing, fearing she would end up like her mother and younger brother. Back aboard the ship, Turan spent time staring across the endless sea while thinking about the Zahar land and the mystery surrounding his father and mother. With only a few heirlooms and a portrait as clues, he had no idea how long the search would take. The one-eyed captain later approached him casually, joking about his intense stare at the ocean. Turan admitted he had simply been thinking about the vastness of the sea. The captain also mentioned that the crew admired how a noble knight was learning ordinary sailor tasks, like ropes and sails. Turan found the knowledge surprisingly interesting and useful. During mealtime, an old sailor explained how pickled cabbage prevented a deadly gum disease that once killed many sailors at sea. Turan listened with genuine curiosity as the man described how people had discovered the remedy after years of suffering. Their peaceful voyage suddenly changed when a lookout spotted an unfamiliar ship ahead with no family crest. The crew immediately suspected pirates. Orders were given to prepare for battle as everyone rushed into position. The captain considered escaping, but realized the enemy ship was faster. He then asked Turan whether he could handle the situation. Turan calmly answered that there would be no problem as long as no nobles or knights were among the pirates. Hearing that, the captain made his decision and ordered the ship to turn and engage the enemy. The crew's fear disappeared instantly as they rallied behind Turan with renewed confidence. On the opposing vessel, the pirates prepared themselves for combat. When Turan asked whether surrender would spare them, the captain bitterly explained that pirates usually crippled their victims before throwing them into the sea. After hearing that answer, Turan stepped onto the enemy ship without hesitation. What followed was a massacre. Pirates fell one after another as Turan showed no mercy toward men who preyed on innocent travelers. His expression became cold and merciless, while an overwhelming surge of power erupted from his body, completely dominating the battlefield. As more pirates fell, the remaining survivors turned toward Turan with a mix of fear and fury. One pirate shouted that if they failed to kill him, they would all die instead. His desperate words erased their hesitation, and the entire group charged together in a final attack. Turan remained perfectly calm. In front of him, a thin strand of ice suddenly formed and instantly shaped itself into a sword. With a single swing, several pirates were cut down before they could even reach him. Others rushed in right after, but they met the same fate almost immediately. One pirate attacked with a spear, only for Turan to block the strike effortlessly and turn the weapon back against its owner in one smooth motion. Even while surrounded, he continued fighting without losing composure. Then he unleashed another devastating attack that wiped out multiple enemies at once. Strange ice crystals began spreading from the fallen bodies, turning the battlefield even more terrifying. In the middle of the chaos, one pirate managed to grab Turan from behind and tried to stab him in the neck. But ice quickly spread across the attacker's body as well. The man shouted for the others to kill Turan while he held him down. More pirates rushed forward, but before they could react, Turan moved like a flash of light. In a single instant, he killed both the man restraining him and the attackers charging from the front. His movements were so fast and precise that nobody could properly follow them. The slaughter continued relentlessly. Blood covered Turan from head to toe, yet his expression remained cold and emotionless, making him appear even more frightening. Before long, every pirate aboard the ship was dead. The overwhelming killing intent radiating from him left even nearby sailors uneasy. Soon afterward, sailors from the Allied ship crossed over using ropes and stared in shock at the massacre. The captain jokingly praised Turan for cleaning the ship so thoroughly that the crew had almost nothing left to do. The sailors loudly celebrated him, their fear replaced with admiration. When asked whether he needed medical treatment, Turan calmly explained that none of the blood belonged to him. Later, the crew reported that they had searched the pirate vessel completely. Inside the captain's cabin, they discovered the truth behind the ship itself. It had once been a merchant vessel from Abaja that disappeared years ago before pirates captured and repainted it for their own use. Because Turan had defeated the pirates alone, ownership of the ship legally belonged to him. Surprisingly, he showed little interest in suddenly becoming the owner of such a valuable vessel. Instead, he simply asked what he was supposed to do with it. The captain explained several options, including returning it for a reward or selling it elsewhere. In his opinion, the best choice was the North Sea archipelago, where ships were extremely valuable. Since operating the vessel required sailors, Turan agreed that the crew deserved a share of the profits. He eventually entrusted everything, including the sale, to the captain in exchange for 20% of the earnings. Before the discussion could continue, a sailor rushed in with shocking news. The pirates had been holding a mermaid prisoner in the ship's lower deck. Curious, both the captain and Turan went to investigate while the crew continued cleaning the battlefield. Inside the hold, they discovered not a mermaid woman, but a young merman instead. The captain immediately lost interest, believing wealthy nobles would pay little for a male merman. However, the boy angrily declared himself to be Armani, the 47th prince of the North Estate. The captain remained skeptical, suspecting the boy might simply be lying to save himself. When asked if he could transform into a fish like the legends claimed, Armani explained he could only do so in the sea and in proper condition, not while chained and weakened. The captain assumed it was merely an excuse to escape. At that moment, Turan stepped forward coldly. Since merfolk creatures were known for attacking humans, he saw no reason to spare the boy if he truly had no value. A heavy killing intent filled the room as Turan moved closer. Armani immediately panicked. Looking into Turan's emotionless eyes, he realized the threat was completely real. Desperate to survive, he quickly offered information about a hidden treasure connected to the gods worshipped by humans. Later, after arriving at port, the captain asked whether Turan had made his decision. Turan explained that the treasure's location was apparently nearby and that he planned to investigate it personally. That night, Turan and the still-chained Armani traveled alone in a small boat. Armani repeatedly insisted he would keep his promise and not flee, but Turan barely responded. Eventually, the prince seriously asked whether he would truly be freed if the treasure proved real. Turan simply answered yes. Guided by Armani, they reached the location. After warning that the treasure might not meet human expectations despite its connection to Freya, Armani led the way while Turan dove directly into the sea. As he descended deeper into the dark ocean, strange ruins slowly appeared before him. Ancient statues and massive serpent-like remains rested beneath the water, looking like fragments of a forgotten civilization. Their true purpose remained unclear, but the ruins carried the feeling of something ancient and mysterious hidden far below the sea. Sometime earlier, Turan and Armani traveled across the sea in a small boat, heading toward the location of the supposed treasure. Armani casually warned him not to expect too much, explaining that treasures connected to Freya only seemed extraordinary to humans from the mainland. As they moved closer, Armani pointed toward a small island rising from the water in the distance. Turan quietly continued rowing, but at the same time he lowered his hand into the sea and activated a search spell through the water itself. Countless sea creatures instantly became visible to his senses, from schools of fish to massive beings hidden in the deep. After scanning the area, Turan confirmed that Armani had not led him into some deadly merfolk nest. When they finally arrived, the two stepped onto the island and searched deeper inland. Armani nervously tried to remember the exact location before suddenly spotting a hidden lake. He confidently claimed the treasure rested at the bottom. The moment Armani casually mentioned that the lake was around 300 meters deep, Turan stared at him in disbelief. Soon after, Armani found himself tied up once again with heavy ropes. Furious, he accused Turan of distrusting him, but Turan ignored the complaints and simply remarked that Armani should hope he survived the dive. After removing his clothes, Turan descended into the lake. As he sank deeper into the darkness, ancient underwater ruins slowly appeared around him. Massive stone structures covered the depths, creating the feeling of a forgotten civilization buried beneath the water. Then he saw it. Wrapped around a gigantic rock formation was an enormous serpent-like figure, and standing above it was what looked like a human statue. The sight was so breathtaking that Turan almost forgot he was underwater. As he approached, he realized something shocking. The statue was not carved stone at all, but an actual human body preserved perfectly beneath the water. It had not decayed, nor transformed into an undead creature. The figure looked frozen in time. Near the body's waist, Turan noticed a glowing object resembling a golden compass. He immediately understood this was the treasure Armani had spoken about. After retrieving it, Turan resurfaced and returned to shore. Armani excitedly asked whether he had found the treasure, and Turan confirmed it calmly. At the same time, water around Armani's body began reacting strangely, allowing Turan to sense his life force and internal energy more clearly. Keeping his promise, Turan used telekinesis to tear apart the ropes and chains restraining Armani. The young prince was stunned that he had actually been released instead of sold again. Turan simply explained that Armani had guided him honestly, so he intended to honor his word. Overjoyed, Armani thanked him and even promised to spare Turan if war ever broke out between humans and sea beings. Turan brushed the statement aside casually while getting dressed. Soon after, Armani stepped toward the ocean, and his body began transforming. For the first time, Turan witnessed the prince's true form as a genuine sea being. Watching the transformation, he realized Armani had truly been royalty all along. The next morning aboard the ship, the atmosphere was far less peaceful. Several sailors were being brutally punished after returning late from the harbor and causing trouble in a tavern. Their backs were covered in painful lash marks, while the old sailor overseeing the punishment screamed discipline into them. When Turan asked what was happening, another crew member explained that the captain's orders had been ignored. As Turan observed the sailors, he noticed something unusual. Most of their internal energy appeared blue, but one wounded man emitted a red glow instead. From this, Turan realized he could now visually sense life force and vitality through injuries. Later, he learned the captain had gone ashore to negotiate the sale of the captured pirate ship. Turan soon joined him and met Captain Samuel, the buyer. Samuel agreed to purchase the vessel for 1,000 Zahar gold coins. However, Turan requested something different. Carrying such a fortune in gold would be inconvenient, so he asked whether he could instead receive magic tools or holy relics of equal value. Samuel explained that such items were difficult to obtain there and suggested visiting Komad, the second city of Zahar territory ruled by a beast-taming bloodline. The mention of tamers immediately interested Turan. A beast capable of understanding human speech could become extremely useful on his journey. The thought reminded him of someone from his past who once possessed an incredibly intelligent horse. Back on the ship, the crew had relaxed considerably after surviving the pirate attack. Some even joked that the pirates had turned into walking money bags thanks to serving under someone descended from God's people. But the peaceful mood disappeared the moment dark storm clouds appeared ahead. Sailors rushed into action as the old man barked orders to secure the sails and cargo before the storm struck. Violent waves soon slammed against the ship, throwing men and treasure across the deck. Just before several sailors were swept overboard, their bodies suddenly stopped in mid-air. Using telekinesis in secret, Turan pulled them safely back onto the ship and moved all the cargo below deck with ease. Once everything was secured, the storm became even more terrifying. Towering waves crashed around the vessel like walls of water, forcing the entire crew to shelter below deck. Freezing winds and seawater left everyone trembling uncontrollably. Turan entered the crowded room and checked whether anyone had been injured. The crew thanked him sincerely for saving their lives, while the captain admitted the ship would likely have sunk without his help. Seeing how badly the cold affected everyone, Turan ordered the crew to gather around him. The captain initially panicked, believing Turan intended to light a fire aboard the wooden ship. Instead, Turan calmly snapped his fingers and created a perfectly controlled sphere of magical flame. The fire spread gentle warmth through the room without harming anything. The freezing sailors quickly gathered around it in amazement, finally escaping the bitter cold outside. As the captain stared at the controlled magic illuminating the ship, he finally understood the meaning behind an old teaching. Humans were meant to serve wizards, while wizards, in return, were meant to protect and guide humanity. The man stood there in disbelief, unable to comprehend the level of magic he had just witnessed. The warmth flowing through his body made him finally understand the teachings the old elders repeated until their final breaths. Humanity was meant to serve the wizard, while the wizard was destined to rule over humans and protect them in return. As those words lingered in his mind, the scene shifted toward the largest city in the northern Enril Desert, Komad. Countless mercenary ships were arriving at the bustling port, filling the harbor with noise and activity. Before parting ways, one of the men handed Turan a pouch of money as a hiring fee. Turan immediately hesitated, feeling the amount was far too much since they had only been helping each other from the beginning. The man then explained that the entire crew had contributed a small share from the profits earned after selling the pirate ship. Refusing the payment would only make them feel guilty, as if they were going against the will of God himself. After hearing that, Turan finally accepted the money and placed it inside his bag. He calmly stated that if fate allowed them to meet again someday, he would personally treat them to a proper meal. The man felt deeply honored by those words. Soon after, Turan stepped off the ship and prepared to head toward Komad City. The mercenaries gathered together to bid him farewell, telling the knight to stay safe and assuring him that they would never forget him. They thanked him sincerely and admitted that they would truly miss his presence. Hearing those heartfelt words, Turan responded with nothing more than a warm smile. As Turan continued deeper into the city, he began sensing the presence of mana within certain individuals around him. While observing the crowd, he stopped a knight and asked whether he belonged to House Durman. The moment the knight felt Turan's overwhelming presence, his expression changed instantly. He immediately lowered his head and bowed with respect, nervously confirming his identity and declaring his readiness to obey any command. Turan then introduced himself as Turan from Abacha and revealed that he wished to meet the head of the house. Not long after, Turan arrived at the residence of House Durman. There, Cal Durman handed him a set of clothes and waited while he changed into them. After seeing Turan wearing the outfit, Cal remarked that the clothes suited him surprisingly well. At the same time, Turan quietly noticed the immense amount of mana flowing within Cal Durman himself. Cal then formally introduced himself with a polite greeting. For a brief moment, both of them simply stared at each other in confusion, as though something about the encounter felt strangely familiar. Breaking the silence, Cal asked for Turan's name and lineage. Turan introduced himself as Turan Brahms and explained that he came from a fallen guardian bloodline. He also revealed that he had heard rumors and traveled there with the intention of purchasing a monster. After hearing his explanation, Cal calmly agreed and decided to have his daughter guide him personally. Before the conversation could end, Turan hesitantly asked whether Cal had ever seen someone who looked similar to him. Cal seemed surprised by the sudden question. Turan then pointed out that Cal had clearly hesitated the moment he first saw him earlier. Trying to dismiss the matter, Cal claimed it was nothing important. However, he eventually admitted that Turan simply resembled someone he once knew. As Cal Durman's daughter guided Turan through the estate, she casually remarked that, although he claimed to be from a fallen noble family, he still seemed to possess a considerable amount of wealth. The fact that he had come to House Durman to purchase a monster only made her more curious. She assumed that perhaps a guardian bloodline was naturally well suited for the life of a mercenary. Turan gave no response to her words. Instead, his mind remained focused on something else entirely. He kept wondering who Cal Durman had seen in his face. Thoughts of his mother surfaced first. He remembered her curly hair, slightly large ears, and straight mouth. Turan admitted to himself that he did share several features with her. However, he could not understand whether those similarities alone were enough for Cal to recognize someone the moment he saw him. That thought soon led him toward another possibility. Turan began wondering if the person Cal had recognized was actually his father, a man whose face he had never even seen before. Before he could think further, they finally arrived at their destination. Cal Durman's daughter welcomed him to the breeding grounds of House Durman. The place was enormous. Countless large rooms stretched across the grounds, and each one housed a different creature. The sight immediately impressed Turan, leaving him amazed by how spacious everything was. As he continued exploring, he noticed that every single room had been specially designed to match the habitat of the creature living inside it. The level of detail and care deeply impressed him. While observing the monsters one by one, Turan eventually pointed toward a horse and asked about its price. Cal's daughter explained that the creature had been raised with exceptional care, which was why it cost 4,000 gold coins. The moment Turan heard the price, he froze in complete shock. In his mind, he immediately realized that the amount was nearly twice his entire fortune. At that moment, he understood that he had been completely mistaken to believe he was wealthy. The reality of the situation hit him hard. Turan started questioning whether he should abandon the idea of buying a monster altogether. At the same time, another problem troubled him. Crossing the desert while carrying an enormous chest filled with money was hardly a safe option either. As Turan continued walking through the breeding grounds, he suddenly stopped after noticing an eagle inside one of the cages. Curious, he asked about its price. Cal Durman's daughter explained that the eagle cost 1,500 gold coins. Hearing the amount, Turan immediately realized that it was far cheaper than the other creatures he had seen so far. Even though purchasing it would consume nearly all of his savings, he still considered it a bargain because of the creature's impressive mana capacity. Wanting to know more, Turan asked about the eagle's abilities. She explained that the creature was extremely intelligent and possessed excellent flying skills. However, the answer failed to impress Turan much. Seeing his reaction, she continued explaining that the eagle was actually one of their more popular species. Unfortunately, its intelligence had become a problem. The creature refused to obey anyone it considered less intelligent than itself. Turan then stared directly at the eagle and wondered whether it could truly understand him. The eagle calmly responded with small gestures, making it obvious that it indeed understood every word. Even after realizing this, Turan casually remarked that the creature was still somewhat ugly. The moment those words reached it, the eagle made an irritated expression. That reaction alone convinced Turan that the creature understood absolutely everything. Cal Derman's daughter then revealed that she had even attempted to teach the eagle how to read. However, it stubbornly refused to learn. She could not tell whether it genuinely lacked the ability or simply had no interest in trying. She felt the situation was a complete waste because the eagle possessed tremendous strength for its size and had been raised on monster meat for years. If only it listened properly, its value would have been far higher. As the conversation continued, the eagle suddenly began making gestures from inside the cage, as though it wanted something. Cal Derman's daughter tried speaking to it, but she quickly assumed there was no point in asking. At that very moment, the eagle slowly stretched its claw toward Turan. The unexpected action completely shocked her. She could not understand why the creature suddenly seemed interested in him. The eagle responded with another firm nod, making its intentions clear. Turan, confused by the sudden attachment, admitted that he was not anyone particularly special, and wondered why the eagle had chosen him. Even so, he made the creature an offer. If he decided to buy it, then it would have to agree to learn how to read. After hearing those words, the eagle quietly nodded in agreement. Using his mana, Cal Derman completed the contract and officially bonded Turan with the eagle. After finishing the process, he admitted that it was surprising how obediently the creature followed Turan. He then advised him to take proper care of it. Turan calmly promised that he would. Even so, Cal Derman hesitated for a moment before asking whether Turan had any connection to someone named Talus. Confused, Turan asked who Talus was. Cal immediately dismissed the topic and asked him to forget the question entirely. However, the name remained in Turan's mind. He realized that Talus was likely the person Cal had remembered the moment he saw his face. Wanting answers of his own, Turan then asked Cal a question in return. He took out a picture of his mother and asked whether he knew a woman named Vijay. Cal denied knowing anyone by that name. Not long after, Turan lifted the eagle by its legs and explained that since he had paid the price and completed the deal, it was only natural for him to confirm that everything was functioning properly. The eagle then carried Turan into the sky for a brief flight. After some time passed, he returned safely. Cal Derman's daughter immediately asked how the flight had gone, and Turan simply replied that it was good. Soon afterward, she began introducing Turan to the other people gathered there. One man seemed surprised after learning that Turan lived in Carmane, mentioning that the place was close to Arabian. Before the conversation could continue further, Cal Derman's daughter firmly told him not to compare their guest to those sparrows. The man then shook hands with Turan and introduced himself as Dolph Marin from a history bloodline. During the handshake, Turan immediately felt Dolph tightening his grip to display his physical strength. Dolph smirked after realizing how sturdy Turan was, remarking that such toughness was expected from a guardian bloodline. Meanwhile, a woman standing nearby showed no interest in their display of strength and quickly changed the topic. She instead asked about the picky eagle because she had specifically come there to see it. Turan explained that he had allowed the eagle to fly around nearby for a while. After practicing writing the entire morning, the creature probably felt suffocated. He then offered to call it over if she wanted. The moment Turan called for it, the eagle immediately returned. The woman was genuinely surprised that it actually came. However, the moment she tried to pet it, the eagle reacted aggressively. That instantly angered her as well. Furious, she demanded to know what exactly she lacked for the creature to treat her this way. She insisted that she could raise it far better than some fallen noble, yet the eagle still chose Turan instead. Both Turan and the eagle stared at her in complete confusion. As the atmosphere settled down, everyone eventually gathered together for a meal. During dinner, the woman mentioned that things had recently become noisy because of the dark elf tribes located in the western regions. The topic soon shifted toward the Arabian subjugation force. Someone mentioned that the commander was the skinny Mesa and openly hoped she would finally get assassinated this time. The group cruelly laughed while insulting her appearance, mocking her thin body and claiming she looked so terrible that they pitied whoever might become her husband in the future. Even while joking around, they admitted that Arabian at least had things easier because they already possessed successors. In contrast, Uncertainty still surrounded who would inherit leadership among Rahman, Alma, or Perga. Eventually, someone expressed frustration that Talus still had not made a clear decision. Hearing the name again, Turan finally asked what kind of person Talus actually was. Calderman's daughter explained that Talus was the younger brother of the househead and currently served as the second-in-command of Zahar. In reality, he was essentially the one leading the entire house. After hearing that explanation, Turan quietly began to realize that his father might have been a far more important person than he had ever imagined. Next, the scene showed Turan sitting quietly with his new pet bird while lost in deep thought. His mind kept returning to Lord Cal, the very person who had reacted the moment he saw him. Turan realized that Lord Cal was the second in command of the Zahar family. The thought of Lord Cal possibly being his real father filled him with fear. He believed that if he truly was nothing more than a stain on that family's reputation, then the moment they discovered his existence, he could be crushed like a mere bug. As those heavy thoughts continued to bother him, his new pet eagle suddenly began scratching words onto the ground with its beak. The bird proudly wrote that it was a black eagle. Turan praised the bird for writing it correctly. However, the eagle then copied the exact words Turan had spoken earlier. Turan immediately pointed out that he had never told the bird to copy that part. He also noticed that the sentence had still been spelled incorrectly despite the effort. The conversation naturally shifted toward choosing a name for the strange creature. Turan asked whether the bird had finally decided on one. The eagle simply wrote that it had not chosen a name yet. Turan misunderstood the response at first and wondered if "not yet" was actually the bird's name. Soon after, he calmly asked the bird why it had chosen him in the first place. The eagle then wrote that it liked Turan. It also revealed that something hidden deep inside Turan felt similar to itself, creating a strange connection between them. Turan quickly corrected the eagle once again and explained that the bird had actually meant to say that it liked him. Even then, he pointed out that the sentence was still full of mistakes. He realized that the eagle still had a long way to go and would need much more studying. As the bird continued practicing, Turan became lost in thought once again. The eagle had mentioned that something inside Turan felt similar to itself. That statement made him wonder if it was because of his mixed bloodline, inherited from both the Zahar family and another unknown family. Before he could think further, Dolph suddenly arrived and called out to him. Dolph mentioned that he was planning to head out for hunting and training later to warm up a bit. He casually invited Turan to come along with him. Turan calmly revealed that he was leaving that very day. Dolph looked surprised after hearing that. He complained that Turan should have informed him earlier and acted as though they were already close companions. Even while listening to Dolph's friendly attitude, Turan remained suspicious inside. He believed that Dolph only enjoyed overpowering others with his strength. To Turan, it felt like Dolph simply wanted to satisfy his own sense of superiority through meaningless behavior. Still maintaining his cheerful attitude, Dolph offered to guide Turan personally if he needed help. He confidently claimed that he knew the entire region well. Turan immediately refused the offer and stated that it would not be necessary. Dolph acted disappointed, but casually told Turan to let him know if he ever changed his mind. After Dolph left, Turan felt even more uneasy. The fact that Dolph gave up so easily made him suspicious. Soon after, Turan began walking around the area, while a servant accompanied him from behind. Turan told the servant that there was no need to escort him so far. However, the servant explained that the order had come directly from Lord Cal. Their duty was to escort Turan safely all the way to the walls. As they continued moving, Turan requested a desert guide along with religious books related to Enril. He also handed over payment for the books in advance. The servant respectfully accepted the request. Later, Turan selected one of the books and began reading through it carefully. While examining it, he noticed that the author's name was Britzo Zahar. He quickly realized that the book had been funded by the Zahar main house itself. Although Turan found the map inside the book poorly made, the information written within still appeared useful to him. As he continued observing the surroundings, Turan suddenly noticed that almost everyone present carried mana within their bodies. As Turan continued his journey, he slowly moved deeper toward the desert. Time passed, and night eventually covered the entire area. By then, Turan had already realized that Dolph had been secretly following him the whole time. Without even turning around, Turan calmly told Dolph to come out now, since there was no point hiding anymore. Dolph appeared while laughing and admitted that Turan had already noticed him. Turan then explained that there was a reason he chose to walk all the way there. Instead of riding an animal, Dolph casually claimed that he only followed because he saw someone as young as Turan traveling alone through such a dangerous desert. He pretended as if he was simply worried about the dangers surrounding the area. However, Turan stared at him coldly and immediately exposed Dolph's true intentions. He directly accused him of being after his mana. Instead of denying it, Dolph only grinned wider. He found it amusing that Turan knowingly came all the way there alone, despite understanding the danger. To him, it was difficult to decide whether Turan's actions were brave or simply foolish. Turan then remarked that he finally understood why nobles hated hearing discussions about ruined noble families so much. Dolph smirked after hearing that, and pointed out the irony of someone in the exact same situation saying such words. In his eyes, Turan's condition appeared even worse than his own. Dolph carefully analyzed Turan and concluded that although his mana was incredibly powerful, his body itself was far too weak. He assumed that Turan must belong to a primitive branch of the Guardian bloodline, a lineage that retained resistance abilities, but lost its physical strength over time. At the same time, Dolph could not understand how someone like Turan had managed to gather such an enormous amount of mana. Even so, he considered it a complete waste for someone weak to possess that much power. He demanded that Turan hand over all of it willingly. Turan calmly admitted that his body was weak, while his mana overflowed endlessly. He sarcastically described himself as the perfect prey. Right after that, Turan quietly instructed his pet bird to leave the area. He then looked back at Dolph and commented that Dolph seemed strangely optimistic. At first, Dolph believed Turan was relying on concealment magic. In his mind, concealment magic was nothing more than cheap magic that only hid appearance while leaving presence completely exposed. He considered it the kind of useless trick employed by weak knights pretending to be spies. Dolph burst into laughter and mocked Turan for thinking such magic could accomplish anything. He confidently declared that breaking concealment magic was extremely easy and told Turan to give up on trying to run. However, the next moment, Dolph suddenly realized that Turan had completely disappeared. He could no longer sense Turan's presence at all. The only thing remaining were faint footprints in the sand. Dolph immediately became suspicious and wondered if it was some special technique connected to the Zahar family. Before he could react further, Turan suddenly appeared from behind and struck him several times in rapid succession. Dolph was left completely shocked. In response, Dolph instantly ignited flames around himself to light up the surrounding area. While gritting his teeth in anger, he believed that illuminating the desert would allow him to break Turan's concealment. He desperately searched in every direction, determined to catch Turan even once. Dolph immediately used the flames he had created to light up the area and launched a direct attack with them. However, Turan instantly disappeared once again. Moving at incredible speed through the darkness, he continuously struck Dolph from every direction. One attack after another landed before Dolph could properly react. Soon, wounds began covering his entire body. Completely frustrated, Dolph shouted for Turan to finally show himself. Realizing the situation was becoming hopeless, Dolph suddenly turned around and started running away through the desert. While escaping, panic filled his mind as he finally understood the truth. He realized that Turan was not from the Guardian bloodline at all. Fighting a mage from that bloodline in the desert during nighttime was practically suicide. Even if Turan truly belonged to the Zahar family, Dolph convinced himself that Turan's physical strength was still inferior to his own. He believed that as long as he kept running, Turan would never be able to catch him. But before he could escape far, Turan suddenly appeared above him while flying alongside his pet bird. Looking down at Dolph calmly, Turan admitted that Dolph was surprisingly resilient. Although he was nowhere near as durable as a true guardian, he had still endured far longer than an ordinary noble would have. Turan even wondered if Dolph possessed some kind of defensive magic artifact. At that point, Dolph completely lost his confidence. Falling to his knees, he desperately begged for mercy. Turan slowly extended his hand toward him, while staring down with a cold, killing glare. He made it clear that mercy was never going to happen. The next moment, an overwhelming amount of fire mana erupted from Turan's hand. Dolph was instantly engulfed within the blazing flames and began burning alive in the middle of the desert night. Dolph's entire body had been completely burned. Seeing that, Turan realized that Dolph had been far tougher than expected. He understood that it was likely because Dolph belonged to a historical lineage. Turan concluded that if Dolph had been a properly trained Zahar guardian, his current stone-throwing attack might not have been strong enough to pierce through his defenses. Because of that, Turan started thinking about developing a stronger attack method. He wanted a piercing spell powerful enough to break through any defense. After dealing with Dolph, Turan prepared himself for the feast ahead. During that moment, he discovered a strange, machine-like object. He quickly realized that it was an item capable of storing magic power. The object showed a remaining capacity of 38%. Turan wondered how it was supposed to be used, and briefly considered drinking it directly. However, he immediately rejected the idea after remembering that it was a divine object connected to Freya. He decided that he needed to study it more carefully before doing anything reckless. Soon after, Turan left the area while flying alongside his pet bird. As the journey continued, he eventually arrived at the Tomb of the Gods. There, he met a young woman and explained everything that had happened during his travels. After hearing his story, the girl realized that Turan had run away from home and had been traveling alone the entire time. She considered his actions extremely reckless. She also understood that he had somehow managed to avoid thieves and dangerous magic beasts during the journey. Turan simply considered himself lucky. Their conversation soon shifted toward the Tomb of the Gods. Turan revealed that he had read in a book that anyone could enter the tomb as long as they had enough money. The girl became surprised that Turan even spent time reading books and assumed that he must have been the son of a wealthy family. However, she informed him that entering the tomb was currently impossible. About a week earlier, several important people had arrived there, and since then, access to the area had been completely restricted. Even merchant caravans had been forced to turn back without entering. Those powerful people were from Zahar. Meanwhile, the scene shifted toward Perga and his companions, who were still trapped in the area. The people around them continued blaming Perga for the situation they were stuck in. Despite the criticism, Perga defended himself by explaining that he had only been trying to secure the place for the family head. He also tried stopping everyone from shouting and causing more chaos. Perga realized that there was a hidden underground area inside the Tomb of the Gods. He believed that anyone who uncovered its secrets could become the next family leader. At that moment, he remembered the underground place his grandfather had once mentioned. Until now, he had believed it was nothing more than a dead-end labyrinth. Every single year, he had searched the entire area for clues, yet he had never discovered anything. Because of that, he eventually assumed it was only a legend. Now, after finally seeing the hidden place with his own eyes, Perga became overwhelmed with excitement. He believed that uncovering the secrets hidden there would make becoming the family leader easy for him. He even started believing that the god of Zahar was on his side. However, his excitement quickly disappeared after witnessing the horrifying reality inside the underground area. The place was filled with terrifying monstrosities. Perga regretted ever entering after realizing how dangerous it truly was. Soon, the monsters completely surrounded Perga and the others trapped there. The group had already become thirsty, yet they did not even have water left with them. While struggling inside the underground area, Perga suddenly heard a strange sound. To his surprise, he was somehow able to understand the unfamiliar language connected to the voice. The feeling made him wonder if he had somehow returned to the desert once again. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to Turan, who was wandering through the marketplace. As he observed the situation around the Tomb of the Gods, he realized that things were becoming troublesome. He understood that the nobles intended to seal off the entire place and explore everything by themselves. Because of that, Turan became cautious. He knew that if he kept wandering around aimlessly, there was a chance someone might recognize the talisman on his face, just like Chief Cal once did. To avoid unnecessary trouble, he decided it would be safer to stay quiet and hidden for the time being. As Turan continued moving through the market, he stopped at a shop and asked about a certain material. The shopkeeper identified it as saltpeter. Hearing the name immediately reminded Turan of something he had once read in the incendiary's book. He finally realized that this was the very material he had abandoned researching earlier because he lacked the necessary ingredients. Remembering the overwhelming power wielded by the incendiary, Turan decided that reproducing the fire spirit's power was worth attempting. After that, Turan began asking several shopkeepers if they had sulfur. However, none of them were familiar with it at first. Eventually, someone explained that sulfur could only be found in volcanic regions. It was mainly used for disinfection, and since there was almost no demand for it in the desert, finding it there would be extremely difficult. Hearing that made Turan regret not searching for sulfur back in Komad before leaving. Still, he realized that he did not necessarily need to travel all the way east. He only needed to locate a volcano somewhere nearby. Later, Turan headed deep into the desert and began creating weapons using saltpeter. Once the preparations were complete, he started testing their power himself. The results impressed him. By using sand projectiles instead of stones, he realized he could freely change their shape while they were moving through the air. He discovered that he could either increase their piercing power or spread them in multiple directions during attacks. Although the mana consumption was slightly higher, the method allowed him to conserve his limited supply of crafted stones. Turan also realized that the sand techniques could be useful for binding an enemy's ankles or blocking their vision. As he experimented further, he even considered practicing movement through the sand, as if he were swimming inside it. While continuing his training, Turan's thoughts eventually returned to the nobles inside the tomb of the gods. Several days had already passed, and he started considering whether he should simply leave for another city instead. However, he quickly abandoned the idea. Turan decided that sneaking inside the tomb was still possible, and if things went wrong, he could always escape afterward. Just then, Turan suddenly heard strange noises nearby. When he turned toward the sound, he noticed two people carrying someone hidden inside a large sack as they secretly moved deeper inside. Turan immediately followed them into the tomb while remaining invisible. As he observed the area, he discovered that the people stationed there were kidnapping civilians. Soon, one of the leaders ordered a kidnapped man to carry the cargo and enter a mysterious black hole. At that moment, Turan realized that the place was actually an animal control manor. While watching, he overheard the kidnappers discussing someone named Purga with concern. The mention of that name immediately caught Turan's attention. He recognized Purga as the candidate for the next Zahar family head. Turan then realized that the influential figure they were talking about was trapped inside. Everything suddenly made sense to him. He understood why these people had occupied the place for so many days. Wanting to get closer to the Zahar family after rescuing the trapped child, Turan approached the black hole. Even though he sensed that it was dangerous, he stepped inside. The moment he entered, his mind suddenly cleared. Turan realized that he had been influenced by something from the outside. He felt foolish for allowing himself to be affected. As his thoughts settled, he reconsidered his assumptions. He realized that there was no guarantee that Purga was the kind of person who repaid favors. Moving deeper inside, Turan finally spotted Purga and his companions. He also noticed one of Purga's subordinates, the same person who had been kidnapped and sent inside to deliver food and water. The subordinate collapsed shortly after entering and began groaning in pain. Annoyed by the constant groaning, Purga responded by delivering a powerful kick to the man's head. Seeing this, Turan immediately understood why Purga Zahar was so infamous. In Turan's eyes, Purga was someone who killed people over something as trivial as water, and showed absolutely no guilt for his actions. Purga certainly did not look like someone who would ever repay a debt. Then, amidst the tense atmosphere, Turan suddenly heard a mysterious voice. The voice declared that he was wrong. It insisted that he was not the Night Haunter. The voice repeated the statement once again, declaring that he was not. In the distant past, the fertile Enral Plains were ruled by giants. With their enormous bodies, they consumed everything in their path, gradually turning the land into a barren desert. These giants required vast amounts of water every single day. When their thirst became unbearable, they enslaved humanity. They drained human blood just to quench that thirst, slaughtering thousands each day. Then, on a moonless night beneath an absolute darkness-filled sky, the Night Hunter of the Freyans arrived. He wiped out every giant, saving humanity from extinction. In gratitude, the liberated people offered him 3 of the most beautiful maidens in the land as brides. The 3 children born from those unions inherited extraordinary powers. One could conceal his body, one could command shadows, and one could create poison. After the Night Hunter ascended, conflict broke out among the brothers over control of the desert. The eldest, who possessed the power to conceal his body, chose to leave rather than fight his siblings. But the second brother, Master of Shadows, and the third brother, Master of Poison, entered a brutal war that threw the desert into chaos and despair. Eventually, the eldest returned, defeated both of his younger brothers, and claimed dominion over the desert. He became the ancestor of Zahar. As this ancient history echoed through Turan's mind, an invisible voice continued narrating these events to him. Turan was shaken as he recognized the name of a god being spoken, and suspected a possible connection with the Zahar nobles, who had entered earlier. He also realized that, technically, he himself was a distant descendant of that lineage. While moving through the underground area, Turan noticed a corpse-like body and several disturbing zombie-like figures nearby. One of those creatures detected him, despite his invisibility technique, leaving him deeply shocked. The creature suddenly charged toward him at full speed. Turan dodged the attack and launched a fire-based counterattack, but the creature evaded it as well. He became alarmed at how it was able to detect him, and concluded that it could see through Zahar's stealth techniques. Turan then pulled out his mana stone and struck one of the creatures with full force, causing its head to explode and killing it instantly. He noticed that the remaining creatures did not react at all to the death of their companion. When he attempted to absorb mana from the dead body, he was unable to do so, confirming that it was a magical creature. The amount of mana he managed to extract was extremely small. Given its physical strength, it should have contained far more mana. Additionally, the holy relic showed no reaction at all. Its true identity remained unclear. At that moment, Purga and his subordinates arrived in the area. Turan immediately withdrew from the scene upon noticing them. Seeing the dead creature, Purga and his men assumed they might have passed through that area before, though their sense of direction had become unreliable some time ago. Purga then identified a threat in the area, referring to it as a rat hiding nearby. He considered the possibility of a rescue party, but dismissed it, reasoning that such a group would have already been detected. He also noted that causing disturbances in such a place would make anyone stand out easily. Purga ordered Galthan to set traps in the surrounding area so the intruder could be captured. Galthan immediately acknowledged the command and began preparations. Purga instructed Imelda to keep illuminating the surroundings at all times. Imelda considered whether the rat should be captured first. Purga responded with a grin, deciding to leave the intruder for now, assuming it was likely just a surviving knight who had been lucky earlier. He allowed the target to roam freely, intending to use him as bait to attract the monsters. Turan continued observing them from the shadows. After 3 days, Turan and Purga's group found themselves in an unusual situation, forced to coexist within a pitch-black labyrinth. Fortunately, the traps laid by the barrier-bearer bloodline were clearly visible to Turan through the vision granted by the holy relic, posing no obstacle to him at all. In fact, due to the darkness, Purga's group often ended up falling victim to their own traps, suffering repeated humiliation. Unlike Purga's group, who were unable to even determine their direction in the darkness, Turan used the holy relic's power to establish multiple safe locations as bases. This allowed him to gradually expand his search range deeper into the labyrinth. Occasionally, they encountered paths swarming with overwhelming numbers of strange creatures. These areas could not be forced through without eliminating the enemies one by one. In such situations, Turan chose to borrow the strength of Purga's group. Although this meant giving up the opportunity to absorb their mana, he did not mind since the creatures yielded such minimal mana that it was barely worth the effort. During these encounters, some of Purga's men were killed while fighting the creatures. Other members of the group spoke among themselves, noting that since the monsters kept being sent toward them, they were beginning to accumulate a large number of corpses. They assumed the enemies were likely targeting them under the belief that the knights were still alive. One of them admitted that if this situation had been known earlier, the surviving knights would have been kept alive instead of being allowed to die. They also expressed discomfort at not having anyone left to serve them. Another dismissed the thought, implying that none of them truly meant it seriously. Turan listened to their conversation and felt deep disgust toward their attitude. Soon after, another wave of creatures appeared once again. Turan saw this as the perfect opportunity, recognizing that while Purga's group created noise and acted as bait, he could move ahead and explore deeper areas. As he advanced further into the labyrinth, Turan encountered a massive door with a huge eye embedded in its center. He observed that the structure was enormous and appeared to have been built for giants. He considered the possibility that the door might serve as an exit from the labyrinth. Suddenly, the eye began to move and focused on Turan. It addressed him, identifying him as a hunter-pursuer, but stated that the required conditions were not met. Then it noticed the watch inside Turan's pocket and reacted differently, recognizing it as a Waverder mimic. The conditions were then declared as met, and it asked whether he wished to enter. Turan remained silent, standing in confusion as he stared at the massive entity before him. Turan wondered whether Waverrider and Mimic could be the names of bloodlines that had not yet manifested within him. He considered that if 2 bloodlines were combined, it would mean he carried the blood of a great house. The eye on the door had asked whether he would enter. Turan realized the door's gaze was not focused on him directly. Instead, it seemed to be recognizing the owner of the Holy Relic's abilities, rather than his bloodline. He concluded that it was using those abilities together with his bloodline to make its judgment. Turan requested information about Waverrider, Mimic, and the door itself. The eye responded that the information request had been accepted without issue. It began with Waverrider. Wave Rider was identified as the first type. It granted underwater respiration, underwater physical enhancement, and fluid manipulation. Next came Mimic. Mimic was identified as the first type. It granted flow detection, absorption, and mimesis. Turan noticed that he had not gained the ability to breathe underwater or manipulate fluids. He concluded that the door might only be using those abilities for identification, rather than granting the abilities themselves. Turan then asked what the entity before him actually was. The response identified itself as the spirit of the door. Turan thought of it as something similar to a librarian, though far more rigid and inhuman. He then asked about the labyrinth, its purpose, and the method of escape. The spirit of the door revealed that the place was the labyrinth of the Night Hunter. It explained that whoever slew the chief while possessing the correct 4 types would become the Night Hunter. The title immediately caught Turan's attention. He wondered whether becoming the Night Hunter meant becoming a god. The spirit explained that slaying the chief would open the escape route. Suddenly, its voice began repeating errors endlessly. The spirit listed Hunter, Pursuer, Waverider, and Mimic. It announced a 2-type error. Then it mentioned Shadow Alchemist and marked it as absent. Immediately afterward, it declared that the 4 required types had been fulfilled. Another error followed. The spirit stated that the identified types did not match those of the Night Hunter. It reported an error regarding the labyrinth's opening. Another message followed, stating that the labyrinth could no longer be closed. The spirit detected internal personnel still remaining and reported that unauthorized personnel had entered. It attempted to inquire with its creator. An error occurred because the creator was absent. As a result, autonomous judgment was initiated. The spirit then issued a deployment order to the labyrinth chief. At that moment, the massive door slowly began to open. Turan wondered what could possibly be waiting inside. As the doorway widened, he saw a giant humanoid creature standing within. The creature grinned and declared that Turan was not a Night Hunter. It branded him a fake and announced that fakes must die. Turan immediately attacked using both water and fire mana. However, the attacks merely tickled the giant creature. Realizing he could not win alone, Turan turned and ran. The creature shouted after him, ordering him to stop. Soon, an entire group of similar creatures appeared. They rushed toward him, attempting to grab and attack him from every direction. Turan narrowly escaped their grasp. Just then, another creature launched an attack from the front. Turan raised his shield to block it. The attack shattered through his shield with ease. In response, Turan sliced the creature's throat open. As he continued moving, he reflected on the labyrinth of the Night Hunter. It was a place that created gods, yet he could not understand who had built it or why it existed. Soon, the largest creature charged toward him and attempted to grab him. The attack failed because Turan was moving with incredible speed. He came to one clear conclusion. The battle would not end until he killed that monster. With that resolve, Turan began cutting down the creatures one by one. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the labyrinth, Purga and his subordinates were struggling against the same creatures. The prolonged battle had already exhausted them. Then they noticed the largest monster approaching their position. Purga ordered everyone to attack together. Before they could react properly, the giant creature drove its enormous claws into the stomachs of 2 of his subordinates. Purga screamed in horror. He and the remaining members of his group immediately launched a combined assault. Despite their efforts, the monster effortlessly dodged every attack and slaughtered them. Purga cursed in frustration. Even the weaker creatures had already pushed them to their limits. At this rate, they would all be wiped out. Nearby, someone mocked the desperate situation, comparing it to a rat fighting for survival. The man then proposed drawing the attention of the weaker creatures. Without hesitation, he charged forward and slashed the giant monster's knee with his sword. The strike cut deeply. The man burst into crazed laughter, celebrating that he had smashed the bastard's knee. The monster responded by grabbing him and hurling him into a wall. As the battle continued, Purga watched all of his subordinates die. Overcome with rage, he blamed the monster for everything. He climbed onto it and repeatedly attacked with his sword. For a brief moment, he believed he had finally killed it. Then the monster's massive claws suddenly tore through his body. Purga could not understand what had gone wrong. As life faded from him, he saw the monster looking elsewhere. The creature announced that it had finally found the fake Night Hunter. Purga became confused. The monster was saying those words while staring somewhere beyond him. Then Purga saw the number 1000. The monster had already killed countless people, yet it still was not satisfied. At that moment, the focus shifted toward Turan. The monster was staring directly at him. Although Turan remained invisible to everyone else, the monster had somehow found him. Turan finally understood the truth. The rat had been used as bait. Realizing that, he tightened his grip on his sword and launched an attack directly at the monster. Turan struck the creature's shoulder with his axe, but he immediately understood that a single blow would never be enough to kill it. The creature repeatedly accused him of being a false night hunter. Moments later, the creature hurled Turan down below. As he recovered, Turan realized that he no longer had lake fire mana, leaving him with only one remaining option. When the creature charged at him again, Turan seized the opportunity and severed one of its fingers. The creature groaned in pain, but continued calling him an imposter and a monster, blaming him for killing all of its children. It kept denouncing him as a false hunter and swore that he would kill him. Taking advantage of an opening, Turan launched another attack and cut through the creature's neck. Relief washed over him as the battle finally ended. He reflected that, without the bloodline power he had obtained from Dolph, the fight would have been far more difficult. Breathing heavily, Turan finally understood how the sacred relic worked. He remained uncertain about the power of the Wave Knight, but he was convinced that the imitator's power had definitely been activated. Although consuming liquids to use it was unpleasant, the power was already fading and would likely disappear within 30 minutes. Afterward, Turan examined Purga's condition and quickly realized that he could not be saved. Half dead and groaning in agony, Purga begged for help. Turan apologized, knowing that saving him was beyond his capabilities. As Turan absorbed the powers of the fallen bodies around him, he reflected on Purga Zahar's life. He remembered a cruel man who had treated the lives of commoners and knights as worthless. Yet he also remembered someone who had fought until the very end against the secrets of the labyrinth. Turan vowed that he would remember Purga Zahar. Once the transformation was complete, Turan wondered what it would be like to use multiple bloodlines simultaneously. Although curiosity tempted him, he decided to leave that experiment for another time. He could already feel his strength surging. He estimated that he was at least twice as strong as when he had first entered the labyrinth. The amount of power he now possessed was likely something an ordinary noble would need 100 years to accumulate. Thinking ahead, Turan concluded that abandoning the magic tool would be the safest choice if he wanted to avoid pursuit from the Zahars. He also needed to erase every trace of his presence. Using tracking magic, he planned to locate any evidence connected to him and remove it completely. After all, he had already killed the labyrinth sovereign. With that settled, Turan ran toward the mysterious door. Opening it, he discovered a throne room. 2 suits of armor stood guard before the throne, while a table nearby held a single book. As he picked it up, he noticed a whirlpool beyond the room and realized that it must be the exit. The book contained records related to an experiment designed to replicate the Night Hunter ascension process. It described a class change in which the Night Hunter was formed from the combination of Hunter, Stalker, Shadow, and Alchemist. The listed condition for ascension was the complete cleansing of evil from the labyrinth. Additional notes questioned whether the challenge had to be completed alone or if a party could participate. Another instruction stated that the mechanism would only open when a compatible target was detected. A further function had been added to lure only that compatible target into the labyrinth. Reading through the information, Turan understood that the Night Hunter was a fusion of the Hunter, Stalker, Shadow, and Alchemist bloodlines. The condition for ascension truly was clearing the labyrinth of evil. The mention of luring a compatible target finally explained the overwhelming urge he had felt to enter the labyrinth in the first place. Continuing through the records, he found detailed notes on monsters. One entry concerned Rotten Jaw. The materials used included giant blood, giant flesh, and the jaw of a giant queen. The notes discussed mana as a power source, methods of extending longevity through hibernation, attempts to replicate acidic blood and fire breath, and efforts to push the creatures beyond their existing limits. The creator ultimately concluded that the results remained inferior to the original dungeon. Turan realized that the monsters had been created from the flesh of giants. He also found references to an Earth Mother Goddess Ascension experiment, and notes indicating that a previous experiment had already failed. Most of the information was incomprehensible to him, but one fact stood out clearly. The creator's goal had always been to produce a Night Hunter. Because of the sacred relic, the gate had mistaken him for a candidate who possessed all 4 required bloodlines. However, both the Shadow and Alchemist bloodlines had already gone extinct. The Zahars had wiped them out long ago. He then recalled Orville the Arsonist, who had claimed that a god had revealed a method for artificially obtaining a bloodline. The possibility fascinated Turan. Relics capable of absorbing and utilizing bloodline powers already existed, making the idea seem less impossible. Even so, he knew there was no point dwelling on it now. The whirlpool exit could disappear at any moment, and he needed to leave. Passing through the vortex, Turan emerged from the underground labyrinth into the desert. Looking around, he concluded that he had made it out, and was now somewhere near the outskirts of Banafel. Soon after, he found his bird companion. The bird angrily complained about his disappearance over the past 2 days. Turan apologized for keeping it waiting. Grabbing the bird's foot, Turan allowed it to carry him through the skies toward his next destination. As they traveled, Turan reflected on everything that had happened. He had killed one of the candidates for the next Zahar leader, along with more than 10 other nobles. The entire desert was surely in chaos by now. It would only be a matter of time before someone identified a culprit. Because of that, Turan decided that he needed to leave the Enril Desert for at least a few months until the situation calmed down. Once enough time had passed, he intended to resume searching for traces of his mother. Remembering something important, Turan pointed toward a distant direction and decided that his first destination would be there. His journey eventually brought him to the gray city of Kalamaf. Upon arrival, Turan remembered that the gray zone was the battlefield where Arabian and Zahar had once waged war. However, something immediately caught his attention. The city's residents were carrying bags and belongings, all seemingly preparing to leave. Observing the situation, Turan realized that the people appeared to be fleeing from something. The townsfolk soon noticed him. Judging by his bird and his appearance, they assumed he belonged to a wealthy noble family. They greeted him respectfully. The attention made Turan think that next time, he should travel wearing ordinary clothes. Introducing himself only as a passing traveler, Turan requested lodging for the night from the city's lord. The response he received was unexpected. The citizens explained that Kalamaf no longer had a lord. The previous ruler had recently died during an attack by dark elves from the west. Since then, not a single noble or knight had remained to govern the city. Hearing this, Turan realized that the situation was more complicated than he had anticipated. Before he could respond further, one of the citizens suddenly dropped to his knees and grabbed at his feet. Desperate, the man begged him to become the ruler of Kalamaf. Turan could only stand there in stunned silence as the shocking request echoed through the crowd.